We'll call the Tuesday, May 28th, 2024 Select Board meeting to order. First on the agenda, we had the reorganization, but we don't have a full board. I think we'll put that off till next meeting if everyone in agreement with that? Okay, we have a couple of warrants, 2423 and 2424, and facilities project 37 and 38. Justin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you, you have warrant number 2423 dated May 16th, 2024. On the payroll side of things, totaling in at $811,944. You will note an additional about $18,000 in overtime for the fire department, a trend that we've anticipated and are continuing to monitor. On the bills payable side of things, totaling in at $900,000 and change. A couple of things worth highlighting. There's about $12,000 for the biannual street sweeping through the DPW. That helps us stay compliant with the MS4 stormwater permit. And on the school side of things, a little over $200,000 in insurance premiums. And on the town side, about $150,000 in insurance premiums. You'll also note facilities project 37, a small amount there, $3,800, rounding out that. And then just rolling on as well to warrant number 2424 dated May 30th, 2024. On the payroll side of things, $950,252. Same story with overtime. And on the bills payable side of things, totaling in at $927,528. You will see there that there is $44,875 called out for the Peabody Street Bridge. That work is ongoing. And for facilities project warrant 38, you'll see for work performed in April of 2024, just over $53,000. Anybody that's driven by over the past week or two, seems like every day that passes, that pile of dirt gets taller. So we're moving on that one. And luckily we do have Brian LaRoche with us tonight from PCA 360 that can iron out some of the tail end of the contractual pieces and maybe give a little update as well.
Okay, any questions on the warrants?
Yeah, a quick question on the Peabody Street project. When is that expected on timeline to be finished?
So, tongue in cheek, what we've heard is when it's done. But in all reality, we're expecting possibly late July, early August.
Okay.
We'll see how they go.
Well, sometime soon they'll be switching lanes that they're working on.
Correct, in the next week or two.
Okay. All right, so I'll move to accept warrant 2423 and 2424 and facilities project warrants 37 and 38 as presented.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do you have a report for us?
I do. Did you want to do minutes? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yep, I'm sorry. Okay, we have some minutes to approve. March 2nd, 2024, April 9th, 2024, executive session, April 23rd, 2024, May 7th, 2024, open session, and May 7th, 2024, executive session, and May 14th, 2024. Has everyone read them and seen them?
Yep. So I'll move to accept all as presented.
And I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then on the town administrator update side of things, a few items. I just want to thank our town clerk, assistant town clerk, as well as our support staff and volunteers for the elections. They've come and gone, successful process, so thank you for all the work that they do. The ballot also featured 2 questions, both of which failed. One of them was the override for the town and schools. The other one was a debt exclusion for Masco roof and HVAC system, which we'll be partly discussing tonight as well. Also, big congratulations to everybody that ran. A lot of the work we do is very dependent on elected individuals, so thank you all for stepping up. I also would like to thank our staff, moderator, board, and committees for all the hard work that went to the annual town meeting. That also was a great success. It was well attended, partly due to several high-profile items, including the MBTA communities bylaw, which failed 101 yes to 161 no. So as we've committed through the process, it's something that we're continuing to monitor. There are elements of it that it's a little bit shifting sands. One of those that's worth highlighting is that Senator Tarr recently released amendments 176, 178, 180, and 181. And among other things, what that would do is provide some type of appeal process for communities that want to, appeal some components of those requirements, and the other pieces that could potentially delay the timeline, pushing it back a year for compliance. So that's something that we're continuing to monitor, and that was a component of the conversation anyway at town meeting. Last week was DPW Appreciation Week, so I just want to take a quick minute to reiterate how much we appreciate the work that they do year-round in some of the worst weather when we're, or most of us anyway, are in the comfort of our homes. They're out there making it all work for us, so a big thank you to them. Thank you to Kevin Welch, our outgoing Veteran Service Officer, who organized the most recent Memorial Day ceremony yesterday. From what I heard, it was very well attended, so thank you to all the citizens and other civic groups that came out and participated to recognize our fallen veterans. I toured the clubhouse of the former golf course late last week in advance of its demolition, just to get eyes on it. Looks like it's largely cleared out at this point, and it's my understanding that it will be raised in the next two or 3 weeks, potentially. Permits have been pulled, so we'll keep an eye on that.
Did the police department already do their training there that was going to happen through NEMLAC?
Yeah, so we actually had reached out, and they have opted to postpone, but they thanked the board for the opportunity anyway. They couldn't get their paperwork together in time.
Postpone as in not do it? Or?
Not do it. No.
Got it.
Our team has been monitoring conversations pertaining to the Mill Pond Dam. That's something that's been popping up on social media and other corners of town. So just to remind folks, that's a privately held dam. It's a high hazard dam as determined by the Office of Dam Safety. And it's actually, the state has been coming out in an effort to lower that body of water deliberately to take some of the pressure off of that dam. So where it is privately held, the town is limited in terms of what we can do. That said, we're not just sitting by, we are monitoring it, and we are exploring certain avenues just to provide options. So we'll have something hopefully forthcoming in the coming weeks, but for now, I just want to reiterate to the public, we are paying attention, we are keeping an eye on it. It's just privately owned, and it's maintained by the state, but we still have some say in it, so we'll do our best to kick the tires on it. And just one last note, we're kicking off employee evaluations for the year. Thank you to department heads that have submitted their self-evaluations. We'll be going over that process over the next month or so, just to sit down and do a review. And that is all at this time. Thank you.
I have a question on the MBTA zone. Are we technically not in compliance now or as of December 31st?
Great question. So as of December 31st, so by example, communities like Middleton, for example, they are out of compliance only because they have passed their deadline because they have a commuter rail stop. So our deadline is a little bit later. It's December 31st. So we are in compliance right up until we're out of compliance on December 31st.
Do any of Senator Tarr's amendments do anything about adjacent communities
So I think
who
that
have no service?
Yeah, so I think that's part of the appeal process is that may be something they take into consideration as existing infrastructure. We're watching those amendments. That said, it's sometimes you just file an amendment and it just goes into the void. So
Yeah, Representative Jones had a similar amendment on adjacent communities, kind of changing some of the process for those that don't have any direct MBTA service. That unfortunately wasn't a successful amendment. And I know that Senator Tarr was trying to flow off of those going into the Senate version.
So it's definitely something that we're in support of, and as always, we encourage people to reach out to their legislators if they're in support of something, just to help give it that little extra push. But like I mentioned, throughout the whole process, the MBTA communities thing has been kind of fluid. So we're just keeping an eye on it. Circumstances change, and we want to make sure we're up to date on it. So.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Justin from either of you?
Nope.
No? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment? Anybody? No? Okay. Seeing none. We're going to skip down to agenda item 12, the municipal complex contract approvals. We have Mr. LaRoche here. I think he has a presentation for us.
Yes, thanks for having me. I appreciate you accommodating the change in agenda. So we have an update for you tonight on the contract. When we were in front of you about a month ago, we were still working through the negotiation with the construction manager. And we have concluded that, and we have an update for you, and we're going to be asking for your approval to award the final contract. So a little update on the screen I have here, just to give you a summary of where we were. The original contract that was issued to W.T. Rich was for their pre-construction effort, $124,000. And then we issued the amendment that I was before you about a month ago. That was what we called an interim GMP that allowed us to do early awards on the contract. So that was $39,088,000. And at that time, I told you that we had a target budget of $59,461,000, and at that time we were zeroing in or sort of getting to a $58,801,000 number for the contract. That's what it looked like at that time. So in the 4 weeks, we continued to work on the awards for subcontractors and do final, best and final bids from the subcontractors. And then some other negotiating of business terms with the construction manager. We've arrived at a GMP, guaranteed maximum price budget number for the contract of $57,999,887. So that is a savings of about $1.4 million over our original target. So we're quite happy with the overall process and the buyout. We're very happy with the award of contracts, the subcontractor pool that we have. So that's where we stand tonight. So tonight's Amendment 2 is $18,911,235. When you combine that with the pre-construction, the total contract for W.T. Rich will be $58,124,797. So that's that, and then I'll give you just another overview. This is just showing it in a slightly different format. We do have a couple of alternates that are not executed just yet. The building committee asked us but not award. We have the parking canopies. They said yes to do. Those are the parking canopies over the police vehicles and also for the Council on Aging. There's two different independent structures. They're part of the scope and have been awarded. Alternate 2 are two satellite parking lots for overflow. They're a grass pave area, one near the Public Safety Building and one by Town Hall. At the moment, we have the price fixed, but it's still open whether we proceed with one or both or none. So we have held the price. The contractor will hold the price till September 1st of this year. So we have a little bit of time whether we want to act on that. The other was the gazebo. There was some discussion in the town about whether relocating the existing gazebo to the new site. We've received drawings from the building department of it, so we know how it's constructed. I went and took a look, took some photographs of it. It's in pretty good shape for the age of it. So the committee, we're going to be making a presentation to them next month on sort of the overview of it and for them to decide how they want to proceed. The actual gazebo for the new construction is about $120,000 to construct new at the new location. So if we were to relocate this, there's relocation costs, but there would be savings for sure. So that's another scope that right now it's on hold until the committee has decided further on how they want to proceed.
Can I ask you a question? The gazebo is how much for a new gazebo?
About $120,000.
So what is that $248,000?
It's the associated work, electrical, the paving, the foundation work. There's other things than just the structure above that goes into it.
Okay.
Yep. Good question. Thank you. Okay, so that's sort of the overview of the GMP budget. I'll just, while I'm here, before you, give you an update on the project schedule. So right now, the two buildings are going to be running at different timelines. We're going to start the public safety building first with the foundations, and then as the project moves into the structure going up in the air, the town hall will move forward. It's a smaller building, it's a little less complex. So at that point, that project will move ahead. And the overall construction timeline for the project has the work finishing in early 2026, January of 2026. It just for your benefit too, one of the things that we're tracking on the project is the permanent transformer for the projects. There's two of them. They were ordered early when we were in design development on the project, November of 2023. They have a 116-week lead time. The transformers aren't expected to arrive on the project till February 2026. So one of the challenges that we're going to have middle of the summer next year is we're trying to maintain the project schedule without permanent power. So we'll be continuing to work with MELD on solutions for how we can do that. And we've made provisions in the GMP budget for accommodations, so that's worked into it as well. And then the eagle, we have the eagle nest with 2 eaglets in the nest this year. They also are a bit of a factor in the overall project schedule. So far, any effort that they begin in a day, they start away from the nest and they work towards the nest, trying to accustom the birds to the activity on site. So far, so good. Very promising. The state came in and had them banded, so I think we certainly weren't as disruptive as pulling the eaglets out of the nest and then banding them and putting them back. So I think so far I'm encouraged by what we're seeing with how they're reacting. So those are definitely two things that are risks to the project, but we have made some accommodations in the project budget to account for them. So just give you a couple images of what's going on site. The construction trailers, these two boxes are now joined. They are going to be the construction manager's field office. And you can see the clubhouse off in the distance. It's about 4 to 5 weeks, to answer your question, Justin, about the timeline. There's a pretty extensive process for demolishing a building. Both buildings have asbestos containing materials in them. So it's a 6-week demolition process to go through, because you have to first go through and basically by hand remove very specific things. And then there's a 4-week process of removing the CMU walls are all filled with vermiculite. So we have to remove that in a very careful process that's monitored. We have a third-party company doing that. Just some other views of the site. They've removed and cleared and grubbed is what they call removing the trees in the area of the new development. There are many trees that were saved and are protected. There's a fence area around them for the future development so that they will be there. You're starting to see the process of removing and stockpiling the soil, the topsoil, which there's an extensive amount. I think that first mound is quite high. I saw it today. There'll be 3 more before they're done. They'll be shaping some of the stormwater management areas on the site beginning next week. That's about a month process. And that's to make sure that we're properly managing any stormwater on site. I know that's been a concern of the community from other developments. The good news about our site is most of the perimeter drains into the site. We don't have some of the concerns that I heard about some of the residential developments around the town. But it's a topic of conversation, and we've made sure that there's plenty of checks to make sure everything's being done properly. I just wanted to bring this up, just you may hear from the residents in the Brigadoon neighborhood. A concern was raised about the placement of the construction site as you exit Meadow Drive. We're going to make an adjustment to the fence line to pull that back, to improve the sight lines for turning onto Route 114. Just in the event you do hear about that, it's going to be addressed. We'll have 2 project signs that are being printed now. This is one of them. They'll be in time for the groundbreaking on June 14th. So we have this one, has an overview of the site plan of the site, and the next one has 2 images of the building. So for the groundbreaking, they'll be placed near where the ceremony is going to take place, and then we'll move them out in a more prominent position towards Route 114 after that. That's the brief overview of the presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So the soil is all gonna be reused on site?
Yes,
So-
it is.
So none of it is leaving the site?
No, we've worked very hard to balance the site. It's an expensive proposition to move soil off-site and on-site. In one of the cost-saving measures we did early on in the project was to keep everything on-site and regrade the property so we didn't have to remove it. It saves on the handling and saves on the trucking and transportation.
Will there be a need to bring any more soil in?
There will, but it's going to be structural soil. It's the underneath the buildings.
So any of the soil that is up at the transfer station from Howe Manning, is any of that usable?
I don't know. There's some old stockpiled material from a previous project. Is that something they
When we
could?
built the school.
I'm
They
not
could-
aware of that.
Yeah, it's at our transfer station, there is a lot.
Really?
Is that something that can get sent out and tested?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can analyze it to see what it's, how it's classified, whether it can be used as structural fill.
I'll get you more information on it.
Yeah.
We can talk after.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
I have a question. I don't know if it's a question for Justin or for you. What's the status of the generator in conjunction with Meld that we talked about?
So the final placement is still being debated, but the only hang-up being the Fish and Wildlife folks on the federal level giving a blessing to having it at the back of the building, I think is the last piece that we're waiting for, and we haven't heard back from them in several weeks. But it's more or less been settled in terms of location behind the public safety facility.
So it seems like it's a go. Okay, good.
Unless they come back and have some type of issue with it.
We don't know what U.S. Fish and Wildlife is going to say. It's close to the 330-foot buffer for the nest. It has a 27-foot tall monopole smokestack or vent stack. Early when we were talking to Fish and Wildlife about the communication tower during our initial design review, they were adamant not to have any monopole type elements near the nest because the birds could see it as a place to put to build on. So we just don't know what they're going to say about it. There's a good stand of trees that are screening the area where the generator is being proposed by the committee that are right here. So the generator is being proposed to be placed right in front of this stand of trees. And then the nest, is back in this corner here. So there's a lot of vegetated screening, which they want, but it's very hard to know what they're going to say about it, because it was one of their very specific comments about the type of communication tower we were using. They wanted it to be a multiple mast with cross braces through it, not a single pole.
Any questions, Brian?
No, it's a good update, thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't know about the vote, because we'll have to execute the GMP contract, so I'm imagining you'll need the vote tonight.
Yeah, so could there be, if it pleases the board, a vote to accept the final GMP budget and contract as presented?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve, which is amendment number 2 of the GMP amendment as proposed this evening.
Second.
Okay, so that's with the parking canopies, but without the gazebo, is that?
Well, the prices are in there, they're locked. But if between now and September you say, we don't want it, we're not doing the gazebo, or we're not going to do one of the parking lots, that becomes a credit change order back to the town. So the price is in the base contract, but it can be removed up till September at that price.
So that $1.5 million savings takes into account already covering the cost of those adults?
Yes, it does. Yep, all that is in the base contract.
So when will we make that, how will that decision be made?
Was it by September?
Or who?
We have till
What's the
September.
process?
The building committee will make that decision.
So that's their sole decision?
I mean, has that been the past practice? I would say yes. But I'm sure they'd love your input.
Mike, I'll tell you my concern with the extras is that we had an original town meeting with a price for this project. We went back and asked the voters for, was it $10 million more dollars? And now there's a couple, maybe close to 2 million savings available. I don't want to just spend it because we got the extra money. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm concerned.
That was in the project as designed, and presented to town meeting. We're still right now running at about a $1.2 million savings, right?
1.5 right now.
1.5 million, including those items.
If you look at it as a 1.5 million savings, I look at it as an 8.5 million overrun from the original ask.
So I'd
Well,
say,
yeah, I mean, but Jeff, if we didn't get if we didn't get the money at town meeting last time, we actually would
Right.
not have a project right now.
I agree.
So it would be a $70 million savings. So for me, the porticos over the police vehicles make a lot of sense for snow. As vehicles are taken online and offline, because we decided against having a garage that all the vehicles would fit in, and that was kind of a compromise to make the project a little bit more financially feasible. I would argue for the Council on Aging van. I would argue for the portico because of the heat during the summer and the snow during the winter. But, I mean, there's a reason why we appointed a building committee and didn't make our board the building committee. I haven't been a part of all the discussions. They have. So I like that they've kept it at a certain price, but a decision to be made later. I'm sure between now and then, we'll probably have some interaction with the building committee. But I think we have to see, as you get through construction, site excavation, if there are any other unknowns yet. And that still includes the contingency that sits in there, which is, how much is the contingency?
Well, we have GMP contingencies within the construction manager's control is 1.1 million. We also have similar contingency on the owner's side, the town side of the budget as well for construction contingency.
Okay.
and Jeff, I'd say if it eases your concerns, there's nothing that I hate more than selling the voters one thing and then going ahead and doing something else. And to the credit of the building committee, there were plenty of other items that they set aside to get to that $10 million number they asked for, but these items listed were always included within that $10 million umbrella.
I would just be, could we approve it? I agree with the parking canopies. Could we approve it without the extra parking and without the gazebo, with the option to come back and, rather than have to
I don't
take
think
them
they'll-
out, can we?
I would
have to
guarantee
make
the
a vote
price
to
of
put
that,
them in.
if we go back in September and October and ask for a reprice of the additional parking, it's probably gonna cost more. Now, this is something that we're holding the amount, but we're not committing to doing yet. So I would rather get the cost held now, and have a decision made. And that's something I think this board can talk to the building committee and surely give.
I agree with you, Brian, but I don't know why we can't, have the cost held and make the decision by that date, but just not, but that would assure that it comes back to us.
So in order to maintain that, you have to execute the contract. If you
Okay.
disallow it, they're not held to that price anymore, and then you'd have to renegotiate, and you've lost the negotiating power. So it's, the way it's structured now is the most advantageous to the town financially. You still have time, you still have the ability to remove it, and you remove the full value.
Okay.
I think the building committee on the parking, just to give you a little background, at the public safety, if the Mel generator goes into the area behind, it shifts the physical parking lot, the visitor parking lot over, which sort of precludes putting in that expansion parking lot or in that part of the site. Because what happens is you're out of phase with some of the tree stands we're trying to keep, and no longer does that expansion parking lot make sense with the way the trees are that we're trying to maintain. So I believe the committee's sentiment would be to remove that scope, depending on where this generator goes. So I think that's why they're asking for time to finalize it. The gazebo, I think they need to consider some of the photos and decide how they want to proceed with that. That's something that is going to be happening in their next meeting.
Okay. So it wouldn't come back to us at all? It would be their sole decision on the gazebo, is what I'm hearing?
Based on the way it's been handled so far, I'd say yes. But that said, I'm sure if you went to that meeting and had a conversation with them, they would take your input into consideration. They're not the type, at least so far as I've experienced, that they're going to try to slam something through on you.
Okay,
So.
all right. Okay, any other questions or comments? No? Was there a motion?
Yeah.
Was it seconded?
Yep.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brent.
Okay, next
The
week.
groundbreaking is June 12th?
14th.
14th.
Is there a time yet?
Was it noon? The groundbreaking?
Groundbreaking?
I can't remember. Whether it was
We went
noon or
back and
1.
forth a couple. Yeah, it was noon or 1.
It was one or the other. I feel like it was noon originally, and then there was some reason why it was moved a little later.
12:30 maybe? I'll double check and confirm with you. Thanks.
Okay, next we have a third quarter update from Town Accountant Sarah Wood. Sarah, you have some information for us?
Thank you for having me. I will try to keep this brief. As third quarter usually is not a lot going on. Everything's usually status quo. But it's when I do start to look towards fiscal year end. And especially now that with delays in meeting, and it's almost the end of May that we're meeting now, there's only one more month left in the fiscal year. So I've got a pretty good idea of where things are landing. But to start, general fund expenditures as of March 31st, we're at 71.6% expended. There are many categories that are below the benchmark of 75%, but I looked back at historical trends and everything is within it. It's not because there's something that we had last year that we don't have this year or haven't spent yet. Everything does seem to be trending as it should. There's just maybe some larger expenses that happen in Q4 versus Q3. And then there were some departments with low or no spending that helps to bring those down, such as our Finance Committee Reserve Fund. We haven't had to use it until recently.
Yeah, we just used it a few weeks ago, yeah.
So that kind of helps to kind of skew the numbers a little bit from that 75%. But those are things that it's good that we're not using them. Looking forward to the end of the fiscal year, I do anticipate having some departmental transfers at your July meeting to vote on. Some of which being salary related, as items were funded in the compensation reserve related to union contracts and merit pay. Some other transfers I know that we will need are the town report, DPW park expenses, Board of Health training and education, and there's a potential that there might be some within the fire department salaries and wages as well with overtime and some new items that were in the contract for 24 that were not budgeted because we didn't have an anticipation of what that might cost fully. Getting into our capital projects, as of March 31st, there was just over $1.7 million in approved general fund capital projects that were outstanding. Of that, 700,000 of those were from FY22 or previously. I'm sorry, 700,000 were for larger items, of which 300,000 were from FY22 or earlier, of which, as of right now, roughly 100,000 is going to get closed out at the end of the fiscal year, because either the projects are completed, or there's the large one of 75,000 for Brigadoon that there's been no activity on, so we're just going to close that out at the end of the year. I am sending out tomorrow to all departments an updated version of the capital project status that we send out with the operating budget and the capital budget. So hopefully we can get a clearer picture for the last month, how much more spending for some of those older articles there's going to be. And maybe there'll be some more projects that'll get closed out from when I did this report back in April. General fund revenues are largely in line with estimates. As of March 31st, we were 82% of collections. There were only 4 categories that were trending below our 75% benchmark: our payment in lieu of taxes, Medicare reimbursement, building permits. I'm sorry, only 3. And then I am very happy to announce that building permits are actually above budget now. We were concerned for a long time that we weren't going to make our building permit budget, but we have in the last quarter of the fiscal year. We currently have a surplus of $16,000 in that line item. So,
What was the big jump that came? Because I know we were.
there was a building permit that just came in for $80,000.
That'll do it.
So that'll help out quite a bit. Scott Fitzpatrick, our building inspector, doesn't anticipate any other large ones, so I'm glad that we did reduce our budget for FY25, as we have no idea what 25 is going to bring.
And the town does not pay a building permit fee for the building,
No.
the building?
No. It would really just be taking it out of one
Right, no, I
pocket into
understand.
another.
Interesting, some towns charge schools and other departments for building fees, which I still think is so ludicrous.
To me, it's all just in
Right.
one pocket,
Right.
out the
Right.
other. So while it may look good on paper, it's still it's a net zero really to the town. Our payment in lieu of taxes, I think we're just missing one payment that usually comes in June. So I don't anticipate any issues with that.
So I know in our draft cherry sheet that came out, it did not include the pilot payment for GL, DYS, and others. I talked to Rep. Jones and Senator Tarr, and they informed me it's because at the time, the legislature hadn't adopted the dollars yet.
Yep.
And they both expect when the final cherry sheet does come, that we will, for the first time in the history of the town, actually receive a pilot payment for the jail.
Yeah, I think we'll be receiving it after they've finalized the cherry sheet. So when we go to set the tax rate, it won't
'cause
be part of that calculation
The
in
state
there.
budget will not be done July 1st.
Exactly.
Never is.
So it'll probably come in a mid-year adjustment, and we'll just see it in a surplus at the end of the fiscal year. Then hopefully going forward, it'll be included in our pilot payments on the revenue side from the state. Overall, as of the end of May, our overall revenue is at 105% of collection. So we have met our overall revenue budget, which will help to offset and increase our free cash as we go through the rest of the fiscal year. Other than that, the only thing I wanted to point out to the board is on page 6 with our capital projects, the items that have an asterisk are the ones that are, I'm sorry, pages 6 and 7. The items with asterisks are the ones that are slated to close out at the end of the fiscal year, in case you are interested in which ones those are. And hopefully there are some more spending that gets done by the end of the fiscal year to close those out a little
Yeah,
bit more.
for example, now that we've ripped all the soil out of the golf course, we don't need to keep the place mowed.
We do not, no. So I think that is one that's slated to close at the end of the fiscal year. And then on pages 12 and 13, which I apologize, they did not, my numbering system did not come over with those. This is again presenting our special revenue funds to the board so that you can see all the other revenues that we do have out in the town. I did break them down between town and school separately versus combining them on the last one. So it's a little bit easier to see. And I did rename some of them to make more sense to other people than me as you look at this.
So I actually had a question on one of the special revenue accounts. So, food pantry donations.
Yes,
So, a lot of generosity is happening.
yes.
Is there a point where that should be moved to a 501c3, in your belief?
The town operates it. I don't believe we can have a
I mean, just, we could have it I mean, it's mostly managed by volunteers, correct?
yes.
And, I mean, people are donating. They would continue to donate. It's It's becoming rather robust.
It is. I don't disagree. A lot of the donations that the COA used to receive now seem to go directly towards the food pantry. I will say there is a lot of spending that does happen from the food pantry every month. It's just more revenue is coming in than is going out. I don't.
What's
don't
the
have
advantage of
answer.
that, Brian?
Well, a bunch of towns that have done this have moved it to a 501c3 because it's actually, because it's not really a town program. It's sponsored by the town. I guess it's happening at the town site, but it's not. We don't have site staff that are actually truly managing it. It's volunteers, and we're sitting at $250,000. That's the only. It's one of the largest special revenue accounts that you have.
It is, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to stifle the donations and the work that's happening there, but I mean, previous town I was at, what they did is they actually turned it over to a group of volunteers and created a 501c3, and they kind of managed the whole process.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Rail Trail Alliance, the Rail Trail. It's an independent 501c3 that does activities, for that.
I would never want to see it not be on the town property and the town providing, even if it needs be that we're providing some funding to supplement as needed, but I was just
Yeah.
asking it out loud. I don't need an answer now. I just want something for you guys to chew on if that should be something.
But I'm still, I don't understand what advantage that gives. What is the advantage?
So what was that account balance like 2 years ago? Well, COVID was different. Pre-COVID, what was the account balance like?
I mean, it's always been high since I've been here. I wouldn't say it's been any lower than $50,000 since I've been here. It has obviously gotten larger. I think part of it is a lot of the money they do get is from the turkey trot every year, which that's a relatively new donation revenue stream for them, where
And usually near
it
the
goes
end of the
directly
calendar
in.
year, there's a lot of folks that make donations.
Yeah, there's
businesses and otherwise.
honestly, it really is just a large uptick in the donations. The expenses have actually gone up because everything's more expensive.
Yeah.
But I will say, Frank Leary does do a good job of going and getting things on sale. He goes to the Dollar Tree a lot to get, so we can get more for his dollar as he goes through and try to get as much for the people that do need the assistance of
kind of
it.
the same thing had happened with Chief Will's Day. At one point, wasn't Chief Will's, well, you guys weren't here, but I think Chief Will's was all going through the town. And then at one point, a 501c3 was created for that.
Yeah, I think honestly it would just be finding somebody willing to.
Yeah, that was
Take
just a
it
question
over.
if that's something that,
I see no financial
Okay.
opposition to it.
okay.
But I think it would be more of just finding
Does it
a
have an
way
effect
to go through that.
on tax deductions for people that donate one way or the other, or it's the same?
No, because they
I
get
don't think so.
Somebody that donates to the Council on Aging or to anything else in the town. I mean, we've gotten donations when we had a police dog. We got
Sure.
donations for folks for the dog and so forth. That's tax deductible. Anything to a 501c3 is obviously tax deductible.
Yeah.
It's probably no different than the Rail Trail Alliance, the Friends of the Flint, and the
Friends of the COA.
Friends of the COA and the building behind the library.
Oh, the historical?
Thank you. My historical mind is getting old. I couldn't remember. I mean, those four are all 501c3s. No, I'm not advocating either way. I was just asking, looking at the number.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Sarah?
On special revenue, so the dollars that are coming over as part of the opioid settlement,
Those are all in the general fund.
they are all in through
So
the legislature.
we
Yeah.
have received more money than what we had budgeted.
Yep.
So my anticipation at the end of this fiscal year is I will move whatever excess money has come in from what we had budgeted, which I think was about $26,000. So far, we've received $44,000 this year. So that net difference, I will move into a special revenue fund and establish that because the legislature allows us to.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm asking is I've had a couple of folks approach me about the want of doing an event to help drive the reduction of stigma and around the issue of remembrance. And I've been asked the question of what is our budget and capability to actually utilize the dollars for that. I don't know. I mean, I know Board of Health, and more specifically our health director, is kind of the clearinghouse of all of that.
Yeah, I know there is a committee, but there also is a list of approved expenses for the program that you do have to kind of follow as well. I need to report every year if we spend any of those monies not on opioid related. So it'd also be a matter of whether or not it fits into any of the criteria.
Yeah, it would fit into around the anti-stigma activities.
Yeah, I
It's
think
just
that wouldn't be an issue.
if that would be what the committee that's kind of working on it would want to spend it on.
Yeah, so, I mean, we will still have 2 buckets of funds because we do have the money from FY23 that is in a capital warrant article that we haven't spent any of that money yet because the anticipation was use the 24 money that we have to budget
Yep.
and spend, and then whatever else move into the special revenue fund. So we'll have the special revenue fund, and then we'll have the warrant article available.
Okay, good. Now I'm done with questions.
Okay,
Okay, thanks for coming in, Sarah.
thank you. Yeah, stick around.
Okay, we'll move along. So next we have reclassification of some ARPA monies, and to talk about a proposal from Coneco for the drainage issue at Kucha Way.
You can take the first part, I'll take the
Okay.
second.
So in the beginning of April, I was doing my quarterly reconciliation of ARPA funds, reaching out to departments that have appropriations, whether or not they still needed the funds or not. And it was identified from our DPW director that the water pump station upgrades with a balance remaining of $10,421.57 is no longer needed. That project is complete. So those funds can be reappropriated. There was also a 10-cent unappropriated amount that we missed somehow. As well as I'm also proposing closing out roughly $35,000 of our administrative expenses that we had earmarked to keep a balance of only $5,000 for next year's single audit. The rest of it, because we will not be spending it before the deadline, I'm proposing just closing it out or reappropriating it to another project, I should say.
If we close it out and reappropriate, will that eliminate the need for doing a single audit the following year?
We will still probably need a single audit, but we will not need an OPEB evaluation that year, so there'll be money left over in our audit budget to make up for the 5,000. So I'm confident that we won't need to adjust any budgetary numbers for that.
So that leaves how much to be reallocated?
So that leaves $46,407.63 available for
That
reappropriation.
includes the 10 cents?
That includes the 10 cents, yes. Trust me, I do not want to give 10 cents back to the federal government.
Nor do
We're
I.
going to spend every penny.
So basically by December 31st, we have to allocate 45,000?
We need to commit it, and by commit it, it means you need to have a contract signed for a project. It's not just the vote of the board, there's other things, so that's why we're bringing it in advance of that deadline, so we can make sure that we have plenty of time to execute any necessary contracts, which leads into Justin's.
So are we expecting on other dollars that we have spent the ARPA dollars on or proposed to, for example, some of the water looping and so
Yep,
forth?
so there'll be $5,000 in administrative expenses. The PBD Street Bridge repairs actually got, I think, fully expended on this warrant. That was the last of the ARPA funds. The water main looping, Paul is using the ARPA funds first, and he anticipates that those will be fully expended within that 2026 deadline.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
And then once we really start to get into, now that the contract is signed for the municipal complex, a lot of the money is going to come out of ARPA first out of that. I don't think I'm going to go back and reallocate any of the funds, but they'll be starting to get some larger invoices that it'll take only a warrant or two to spend that
To
money.
spend it. Okay.
And so basically, what was it, 46,000?
Yes, 46,407.
So we're not going to be able to make any large, sweeping, impactful changes that are going to change the direction of Middleton forever, but there are a list of smaller infrastructure needs that we could potentially apply this to. So one of them that goes hand in hand with the previous meeting, which this actually was on the agenda, but we postponed to figure out how much it would cost, is that pipe off in the woods in relation to the what's the name of it?
Kuchar Way.
Yeah, thank you, Kuchar Way. That mystery pipe that we found out there, and so we did get a quote from Conoco. It would cover 3 tasks: to review the available site plans, perform drainage evaluation, and put together a technical review letter. They did stress that any design services for upgrades to that pipe, if they find it needs upgrades, are not included in that total cost. So it would be $5,300 to complete those 3 tasks, basically looking at the existing infrastructure, running the numbers on it in terms of a drainage evaluation, and then letting us know if an improvement is needed there. So I would recommend at this time to use that funding where it's found money to put towards this expense.
I
If it's
agree.
agreeable to the board.
I agree.
And do you have any other
Yes.
recommendations?
Yep, so I want to see what part 2 comes out of this, so that's one component. There's another one actually coming up on this as well, the traffic count study, number 10 on the agenda for Memorial Hall to bypass the intersections of 114 and 62 through Memorial Hall. That's another potential good spot to spend that money.
Okay.
Put it to work instead of giving it back.
So do you need a motion for us tonight on Conoco
I
3
would
tasks?
take it if you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approved the proposed 3-task process proposal for Conoco in the amount of
5,300.
$5,300.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And when do they think they'll have, once that gets executed, when do they think that study and report will be back?
I'd imagine a couple weeks.
Oh,
but,
okay, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
nothing too long.
Can I also get a motion to close out that
Oh.
administrative and the water?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve, thank you very much. I move that we approve the administrative expenses of $35,985.96, as well as the water pump station upgrades of $10,421.50, including an unappropriated amount of 10 cents and a total of $46,407.63 that is now available for reappropriation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So one thing I meant to ask, and I forgot on your previous, what is the balance in the sidewalk fund? Do you have that?
Ooh, the sidewalk fund is now a stabilization fund. So there is, here, hold 1 second, I do have that. There is currently $152,495 in that fund.
And is there funds coming into that from Kuchar Way? Are there funds due, do we know? I don't know if we would know that offhand.
I don't know. These are, the funds that come into that are from when developments.
Right.
I don't know if we received any from there.
Okay.
The town planner maintains that listing.
Okay.
I don't think we've received any revenues this year, so the way that this stabilization fund works is that the monies are received from the planning board. They go into an account and then I sweep them into the stabilization fund at the end of the fiscal year. So I haven't done that analysis yet. I don't think that there's been any money that has come in yet this year.
Well, we seeded it also, right?
We did. There was a balance. We closed out an old agency fund because that was not the correct way to
Yeah.
maintain that account. So we did close out that balance. That was $128,000, I do believe, and move that in. There was about $14,000 that got added to this fund from revenues received last year, but I don't know off the top of my head if there's anything from this.
So is there any group working on ideas of where to use these funds? Is anybody actively, maybe at the planning board or any?
We did use $33,000 of these funds for the Boston Street sidewalk plans.
Which was the match for the grant.
Which was the match
Yeah.
for the grant. So I know the town planner previously was the one tracking the funds and maintaining and figuring out uses for that. I would imagine our new town planner would assume that responsibility.
I believe there was a ranking that was done at some point by
There was,
Paul
yeah.
and Katrina of, because we were trying to focus on those areas that could help feed the rail trail.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's probably a worthwhile point, once the new town planner is fully up to speed, that we kind of revisit that, but also at the time, I was going to say looking at additional grants, but I'm not sure how successful we'll be at that now. But I think what we really probably should do, Jeff, is start looking at for next spring's town meeting, having some items that would be within the capital plan funded through a portion of that. What we haven't talked about is what balance do we want to keep in there and what amount do we want to spend? Because we don't know what
Yeah.
income we're going to have. There may be projects that the planning board is negotiating some.
I mean, I don't think you make a determination to keep a balance. If there's a good use for the money, you spend it, even if you drive that account down to zero.
I agree with you, Klaus. Yeah.
Because there's always revenue that's going to be coming into it
Yeah,
from
yeah,
the fees that are assigned
It's-
to it,
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it was set up originally as an agency fund, because the money was supposed to come in and then immediately
And then
go
flow
out,
right out.
and it didn't. So.
And there was
fully-
probably years and years and years ago fees that came in that just never made it
It
over there.
absolutely was, yeah. But it is something that should definitely be part of our capital plan for
Okay.
each year. Thank you.
Thanks. Good job.
So I think next is a follow-up discussion of the annual town meeting and town election. I think you alluded to some of that in your opening statements. I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to add?
Sure, so just, I guess there's 3 items in particular. 2 of them I can knock out real quick, and then the third, we have some guests to join us. So, the first one is the MBTA zoning component. Just as I mentioned, and I'll restate, it's something that is constantly evolving, and we'll continue to monitor it in terms of our approach. The other piece is the override, which was actually widely supported at annual town meeting, but unfortunately defeated by ballot. And so we've had conversations at our recent department head meeting about things that we potentially could have done differently. You know, some elements are outside of our control, the economy, the fact that we just went to a special town meeting to ask for $10 million, the potential, you know, unknown but potential impact of mail-in voting and how our messaging reaches those people, or if it reaches those people. So we're taking a hard look at that. The need that we demonstrated doesn't go away. It will be coming back next year. I think we just need to take a hard look at the way we approach it and the way that we get the word out, because we found by and large the people that we were able to connect with were largely supportive. So just looking for ways to connect to those other folks.
A lot of the needs will be still there. They're not going to be exactly the same as they are now. One thing they will need to discuss is if building that extra capacity, I mean, this year was a little over $1 million in FY25 spending, but the ballot question said $1.8 million.
Yeah.
Whether that extra capacity and that higher number turns people to a no.
And that was part of the conversation that Finance Director Wood and I had today, actually, is what are we projecting, if that price is what we laid out this year, what are we projecting it to be next year? How much realistically will it increase if it's determined the need to increase? And also some elements of that, whether or not we can try to find ways to incorporate strategic surgical cuts in the budget to try to fit some elements of that override in, which is a little bit of more of an uphill battle.
Well, I think the thing that I'm most concerned about in the coming fiscal year is specifically in the fire department. You know, the staffing increase that was proposed there was because of the significant shortfall needs that are happening in staffing, more specifically for me around the ambulance. And I'm really concerned about the overtime cost. I mean, I saw it in the 2 warrants that we just went through. I mean, we were hoping to get some significant breathing space on overtime costs as we could get to a better staffing ratio that fit the needs and the call volume that are happening. So I just don't know how we solve that at that department. I think the police side is the staffing numbers will be what the staffing numbers are, and we're going to operate as such. Those were really the significant portion of the municipal side of the override. The school side, I'm not sure what Scott and Steve and others are looking at in terms of some of those positions and some of those areas that were funny. And theirs was about, okay, I was going to say about 400,000. Okay. And I don't know what that means for the schools, but it's probably the fire that I'm most concerned about.
Yeah.
Well, just remember, one of the reasons that our need was only $1 million is because our master assessment only went up a little over 2%. And that's, because of the net school spending shift in our favor and to the detriment of primarily Topsfield. For FY26, that could be
The opposite.
the opposite, and therefore we would have a large Masco operating increase that would drive that number, that $1 million number.
I mean,
And-
to your point that the cost next year could look different just because the focus could be different.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the fire issue still remains, the police to a maybe a lesser extent. I can't speak for the elementary schools because I don't know what Scott and Steve are thinking over there, but
And we'll have some indication in late October when the enrollment numbers are known from Masco, the elementary, and Essex Tech about what the likelihood of that net school spending shift will be.
Yep.
And we can start to plan at that point.
So all important points, and then, Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, we have the Masco school reps here. Would you like to join us at the table?
Yeah, come on.
We're at it, so if you'd like to introduce yourselves for the folks at home.
Sure. I'm Trevor Currier.
Kendra Petroni.
Lisa McInnes.
And so just to follow up on that discussion, that's kind of why I'd asked to come here today to follow up post-town meeting, post-town elections, just to start this year off on the right foot and to just communicate early and often. And so we have this open line of communication. And I think it was clear at both the town meeting and town election that we don't just want Middleton support, but we also need it to be successful and for this project to be successful. And so as the committee, we haven't met yet since before town meeting, so we still haven't met in an open meeting to discuss the next steps forward, but all the cards are on the table, and we're looking to do that. I think the chair had said late summer, early fall, to kind of start that discussion again. So I just wanted to make sure all of you were aware as when we're going to be having those discussions, what, could come out of those discussions, and just so we're all on the same track. And to Justin, I know I forgot to get back to you. I just got that number today. We have roughly $900,000 in our stabilization account, which was a question I've got a couple times, so just to clear that.
Yeah.
Well, you guys call it E&D, right?
No.
We have.
There's E&D and there's a separate stabilization fund.
Okay, E&D is basically their free cash. Yeah, okay.
What, with the town meeting and the ballot decision, is what was presented, a $5 million for OPM and design, it obviously failed, so it didn't, resonate, with, voters, so you gotta come back with, something different, and, in my view, the school committee should decide, on like the heating. What is it that you want? Not, okay, if it's we do the same system as we have, just replace it, it's one cost. If we do heat pumps, it could be another. Make a determination, maybe during, the year, of what it is that you want, what the cost is, and I think, asking for the total cost makes more sense, because then you can make the argument that if you vote yes for this money, these items will be fixed. The way it was structured now is, if you vote for the 5, we don't know whether it's going to get fixed or not, because that's dependent on a vote somewhere down the line, and we don't know what that is. And you also have some other, in your some of the presentations were like to be determined. Do you need to reconfigure spaces for your new strategic plan for in ways of teaching? Do you need to reconfigure spaces, or your athletic facilities? Or I would just put it all together, and one amount of money that will fix all the problems that you can identify and think that it'll be addressed. And so if I was on the school committee, I'd be advocating for spending the year communicating to the voters what the needs are, independent of the solution, and then come back with a solution, an amount of money that will fix all of those problems. You'll end up having to hire an OPM once instead of multiple times, because any project over $1.5 million needs an OPM, and so if you ask for funding in stages, every time a stage is approved, you need to hire an OPM.
And what year, when you say come back, what year are you picturing?
I would say next,
If you can get all that together,
That's the
May
thing.
25.
Next year, all that costs money. Deciding on what heating system we're gonna do, all those feasibility studies that need to be done cost money. And in addition, we're planning on leaving that to the building committee that is to be formed this summer. So
Yeah.
I don't know if 2025 is gonna work, May
well, I mean,
2025.
if it takes you 2 years, fine. I'm not saying it's got to be longer than that.
But I
I'm
think
saying it's
by-
got to be
I
as
think
soon
by
as you can
later
do it.
this year, we're gonna have clarity from MSBA if heat pumps are gonna be in the mix. All signs are pointing that they're heading in that direction, because this administration does not want fossil fuels. They want alternative sources of heat. A lot of cities and towns have already moved to that for new. I mean, we're doing that in our project right now, at the police fire town hall in community center. I fully expect MSBA is going to move to that, which is probably going to make it a more competitive program, but that's okay. But as I also said, I think to you, Trevor, and others, and I spoke to you about this, Lisa, if they come back and say heat pumps aren't in the mix, but you all come back and say we think this is the right choice, then we advocate that we fund it with town money, without MSBA money for the heating system, because it makes sense because of the work that you guys have looked at of replacing with what we have, replacing with heat pumps, and then I heard during the process of geothermal and others, look at the alternatives. The building committee and then your school committee and the administration jointly coming back and saying, this is what we've seen, and then to Costa's point of the other needs. And this took me a while to get here when we were doing the municipal project. I was originally the guy that said, let's do one building first and then another building later. But as we went through and we looked at all the needs, I knew what the needs were in all of our facilities. I was concerned about the appetite of the voters. But once we showed them all of the needs, from a senior center that was abysmal to a fire department that we were going to have to spend more money on a ladder truck because a standard ladder truck wouldn't fit, to a police department that wasn't even compliant on the jail facilities, then I became a believer of having to go for the full project. If there's other items that you guys have on your list, put them in the mix and then come back with the big plan. And I will tell you, I think I saw it with our municipal project. I mean, you guys remember that town meeting outside under the tent? That was the easiest item to debate and vote on that year. We spent more time on changing language in our charter.
Yeah, and, it's the building project, the municipal complex, the need was talked about before the solution. So it wasn't, okay, approve 61 million because we have a need and this is how we're going to solve it. The need had been talked about consistently for a number of years because there were two other committees before that sort of kept harping on it. To a lot of people, what they heard around this town meeting about the needs of Masco was the first time they were hearing anything about it. So to me, it's hard to convince people of the need and the solution at the same time. It's easier spend time talking about and showing people what the need is, and then when you come up with a solution to that need, then I just find that people react better to it and are more likely to say yes than if they haven't heard anything about what the need is, except in conjunction with an ask for money.
But the thing is that there's absolute emergency needs in that building, and there's other needs. It's just like when we first talked about our override, the fire chief and police chief came to us and said there was a need for 5 more firefighters and 5 more police officers. We talked to them, and I think the override included, was it 2 and 3? 3 and 2. So that, I don't know if we want to give them direction that just throw every need that you see into this thing, and it'll be, that's my fear, because there's
Well, I mean, I
minimum needs and maximum
I
needs.
believe the building committee that you guys are putting together, and then the administration and your school committee, which ultimately, because you guys are a regional district, so your school committee you're the legislative body for your school committee. You're not our town meeting. You're your legislative committee. I mean, you adopt a budget, we determine whether or not we're going to fund it. And truly, I trust the school committee to actually come back with a plan. What I would ask is, and I know you guys have been the face and the voice in the front of this, sometimes the administration needs to stand up too, because that's sometimes what the town wants to hear. Sometimes they don't want to hear from us, they want to hear from him, or they want to hear from Sarah on the cost and the administration of it. So I'm fine with, I'm not asking you to come back with the kitchen sink and everything thrown in.
Well, I'm not advocating, just want to be clear, that,
No.
anything and everything you can think of put in, because the higher the cost, the harder to say yes. But everything you think you really need,
Well, that's the thing, really need, not
But-
need.
but
There's a
if we
difference between
went
need
forward-
and really need.
If we went forward with just the police and fire, and then a couple of years later came back with the senior center, I don't know if there would be an appetite at that point. It really wouldn't have been an appetite.
I think from what I gathered from just my first year experiencing all of this was when they divided them up into the categories, I think the fear was that if we did put everything in all at once, you correct me if I'm wrong, that it would be overwhelmingly, oh my God, what the hell is all this, asking for Wi-Fi and HVAC and plumbing all in one. So I think just to kind of support what I think the idea was that it would be a lot to throw in all at once to have all of the urgent needs. So I think that's what the intent was with the categories, just to try to get the most urgent things done. But I hear what you're saying every time. Can't keep going back asking.
Well, we were seeing it,
understand
when I
that.
first started hearing about this, it looked like this could be a 3 to a 4 year cycle of every year requesting an override for another big project. And I will tell you, as we just saw last week, I think part of why the ballot passed for our operational override is we just came back 2 years in a row of previously asking for an override for the municipal project, and then came back again, and voters and taxpayers were a little tired. I get that. I think we could have done a better job of describing what the override operational meant for police and fire and elementary. Yeah, I woulda, coulda, shoulda, mighta. But I think of, well, here's what we think for roof and HVAC and building systems. And then a year or two later, we're gonna come back with the part B on it. And then a year or two later, come back for part C. What would be helpful in the beginning and said, the whole shebang we think could be this. Now, it doesn't mean you're coming out and asking for it all to be funded at once, but I think if the voters know what's coming, and that was kind of the issue a year ago when we were talking about the feasibility of the turf field, which was, yeah, well, a group's going to raise the money. Okay, well, what if the group doesn't raise the money? We just spent money to study the feasibility, but we don't know what the cost is going to be, and if the money's not raised, what happens? It was kind of the same point here, which is, don't be afraid to say, this is what all of our need is. Now, we don't think we can fill it all at once, but just want you all to have line of sight to it. And then, this is the recommendation. And I do trust both the school committee, the administration, and your building committee to make that decision. And there's going to be a lot of arm wrestling. I mean, our building committee arm wrestles. You saw, we did a little arm wrestling tonight over two smaller items in the contract that they're still struggling with, and that will happen.
You know, after the Habib report was put out and the school committee was trying, to decide, how to approach the needs that were identified there, the school committee created the District Capital Improvement Task Force. At that point, DCI was its own, subcommittee. There were 3 members, 1 from each town. And the task force were those 3 members and a FinCom or select board member from each of the 3 towns. It was John Erickson from Middleton, forget his last name, is the FinCom in Topsfield, and Barbara Jessel, a select board member from Boxford. And those 6 people were going to look at the issue of, do you fund those requests, those needs, by, one ask, multiple asks, and when do you do that? Sort of resurrecting that might be a good idea, because people in Milton may say, well, we want to see it this way, but you got to get all 3 approvals. And if a group that like that comes up and is of the same opinion as I've expressed, do it all in one ask, then it's clear what kind of path the school committee should take. If you get conflicting opinions from the different towns, obviously the school committee has to pick a path, because it can't just do nothing. But at least you can say to all the towns, look, we've discussed it. The 3 towns couldn't get on the same agreement, so we had to choose the path, and that's why we've chosen this path.
I don't know if I agree with asking for everything at once and trying to get, I think you asked for a whole project at once. So rather than ask for the feasibility money for an HVAC or a roof, come and ask for the total cost of the HVAC and roof. But I don't know, coming with ask for 6 or 7 projects is going to have a better result than
No, but
coming back.
I think they have to stack rank it, Jeff. I think what they really need to do, because what
A 10-year capital plan, I think,
yeah.
is what you're all describing, just so people have a line of sight and they see what's coming down the road.
I mean, somebody asked at our town meeting this year, I'm not sure who it was that stood up, was asking about an item in our future capital plan for, I think it was this facility. Was it?
The roof, I think.
Yeah.
No, it was doors and windows, I think it was, or was.
They didn't want to do the roof if the lifespan of the
Right,
building.
But there was, and then there was a future potential $2 million item on there.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that $2 million item is going to get approved in 2 years, but it's on the long-term capital plan that the elementary schools continues to update regularly and come to us. Now, they can't come to us and say, well, we need $2 million this year because this is the year that we've had in our plan for 5 years to replace windows, for example. Well, no, but don't come to us 2 years from now out of the blue and say, we got to replace the windows. So I think what Costa's saying is look at all the needs, but also to what Jeff's saying. I'm not saying here's all the needs and boom, let's do them all at once. Lay out a plan, because if the plan is to do roof and HVAC, then come back the year after for another piece of an undefined cost, and then a year later do the next piece of an undefined cost, I know what the voters are going to say.
And so, oh, my apologies, I would just say, because I can feel it on the tip of your tongue, the capital plan that you all do have, make sure the numbers are based in reality, and that's an issue that I think we're running into.
And so to Jeff's point, I wouldn't feel we would be in the same position today if we didn't fund a feasibility project separate, where our numbers were throwing an arrow at a dartboard. Like those things, same things could be said. If we did that in a year, came back with the full project, I don't think we would still get buy-in. So I think the committee needs to weigh that, but I don't think funding a feasibility project study is a bad thing, even if that's separate. So we
It
can.
seems to not be, and you can know more about it, all three of you know a lot more than I, but that's not really hasn't been the norm, right?
Well, we're doing that for this roof.
Well, see,
It would turn to get us to-
yeah, you weren't, this ask wasn't a feasibility study.
that would provide new estimates in our design work, yes.
Yeah, if you wanted to do a feasibility study, that's $200,000 or $300,000. It's not $5 million.
For this project.
Oh, no, because that $5 million included the
Full
hiring
design.
of
For
the,
the lifespan.
and
And
the
a full design.
And for the lifespan of the project.
So that's what I was asking, if that was the norm, not the feasibility, but hiring the OPM and all that, I don't think it's.
So
the
if
norm.
I could knock you out something back of the envelope in terms of a timeline that would get you to next May, and part of the reason I asked how much money you have in hand is because you'll be able to maneuver without having to get a town meeting appropriation, which could potentially trip you up. So if you have $900,000 in hand and you wanted to do a conditions assessment or feasibility study, ballpark about what Costa said, $250,000. So you're not going to draw down all your money and be left with no money.
Wasn't the elementary, this roof, 300,000 at town meeting?
It depends, but either way, you're not going to exceed 900 or even come close to it. But go cost it out. You can get an RFP together. You have over a month, and you could release an RFP for those services on July 1st. Sit it out for 4 weeks, get your results back on August 1st, review your responses and select a firm. And that firm could then take August, September, October, November, and December over a 120-day study of the existing conditions of that facility, reconcile estimates in the same way that we just did for the municipal building project, and they could have a firm number for you by January or February of this year, which would mean you could come into the March 1st Capital Saturday, at least for Middleton, and have a firm number in hand about what the roof and HVAC system is going to cost you. Roll that in through the town meeting process to the May 13th annual town meeting, and come with an actual up-to-date recent report with actual firm numbers about what it would cost for the design, for the OPM, and for the construction costs. And you can do that from now straight through to annual town meeting 25. It's a clear shot.
So the committee obviously has to decide, but that
Yeah.
doesn't go unheard, so.
So what I'm hearing from you is time is of the essence, it gets started right away.
Yeah, so you have a little wiggle room there, but not much. But if it's that urgent, you guys need to get going now. So,
And I think, based on that timeline, if at that point we come into March and we know that heat pumps are out of the mix, then I think you go directly to town meeting and say, the heat pumps aren't reimbursable, and they may not be for the foreseeable future. This roof today is not reimbursable because it's not 25 years old or older. And then we make a determination at town meeting here and in the other two towns of just fund it, if it's that immediate of a need. If you look at it in the assessment, you say, and MSBA has come back and said, you know, heat pumps will be coverable, maybe we go for a heat pump process and then we eat the full cost on the roof because the roof isn't 25 years. And I actually think, we talked jokingly about groundbreaking, I think you could roof break, probably in the timeline that you guys were originally looking at in this year's town meeting. I don't think you I mean, because if you look at the timeline from when we said, boom, fund the project for the municipal project to shovels in the ground, that
3
was-
years.
For us was 3 years, but we had a significant delay in between because, bless you, we had a significant delay in between because of the COVID inflationary numbers that tripped us up. And actually, hopefully, you guys will be on the other side of that, where the numbers will actually, as we're starting to see in some construction costs, are starting to go down. Hopefully. I actually think you could probably stay in a very similar timeline, that maybe roof is MSBA eligible because it'll be 25 years, but if it's not, it's not. If the HVAC is, that's huge. If they're not going to approve it, then you have an argument of this is our needs, this is the cost of the needs, do you want to fund it all or not? I mean, you go for the full funding amount and then the money comes from MSBA. I mean, you bond the full amount anyway. You don't pay it, but you bond the full amount if you get MSBA reimbursement.
And on that note, I'd also recommend immediately reaching out to the MSBA, and they will assign you someone from the state that can hold your hand through this process, so you're not guessing, and it's not creating extra work for your administration. They'll lay it out exactly for you, what steps you need to hit when, what exactly you need to do. And ideally, I'd like to, get you all in a place where rather than, in so many words, trying to work around Middleton, we can work alongside the committee, I think is the end goal. And so I offer it to your administration, and I'll offer it to you as well. Please use me as a resource. Our staff is a resource. Like, we're very eager to help and put our shoulder behind this and help you push, as long as we can kind of check some of these boxes.
Yeah, that woman that was on the MSBA call, she will be your rep, because she's the rep for the year. I mean, my wife's working her right now with Manchester, Essex, for a project that feasibility was just approved at town meeting a couple of weeks ago for a new elementary school in Essex. And boom, she's there. She's now working with her literally every day. They're standing up a building committee.
Is that prior to receiving funding or after, you said?
It's never too early to reach out.
Okay. Not to you, to MSBA.
MSBA, soon
No,
as
to
you
them,
guys,
yeah.
soon as you guys go forward and say, hey, we're starting the feasibility processes, we'll do, MSBA will walk along with you.
So the feasibility question, like with the stabilization and all that, like that's a serious discussion the school committee has to have, just because of how the current system, our current systems are working, and maybe projected costs. We're thinking if something were to happen to those systems, if we would need that money. So it is an option, but it's definitely worth discussing as a full committee.
I mean, the building management system's not an uncommon item in schools today in Massachusetts. Building management systems are basically inoperable, and it's literally a manual. Twice a year, somebody's switching over from heat and AC. The bigger issue is if something catastrophically fails, there's processes in place. If something catastrophically failed over there, we're all three towns going to be calling special town meetings. We understand that. Beyond what your E&D and your
Stabilization.
why am I always have a mental block? Stabilization fund would be. And then, but that could happen, but it would have happened, if it was going to happen, it was, I mean, you were looking at 27, 28
Yeah,
anyway,
same
so it
time
was going to
frame,
happen.
anyway.
So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. If, hopefully, baling wire and chewing gum is going to get you to the point of either this calendar that he just described or any iteration like that. But being able to go in and say, here's what we think the total cost would be, we've studied it, here's what the consultants have come back with, here's some real dollar amounts, this is what it'll need. I mean, we had the ability to say, if we bonded it now, this is what the cost would be for an average household here in Middleton. And the average household is this amount, this is how much it would be annually. That helps greatly. I mean, it's how we got $70 million to build 2 big buildings. This town, if you remember from Hal Manning, it took a lot of, well, you were really young, Trevor.
First, third grade class.
There you go. So, but during Hal Manning, it took 2 bites of the apple.
3. The third was the
Yeah.
successful one.
Are you, what, Okay.
I was just going to say, you know, once we have a chance to meet and sort of discuss as a whole group, and I think there's going to be a lot of reorganization, I think it's going to be hopefully, you know, a stronger line of communication and right on task of what, you know, all three towns equally can do to make this work, because, you know, we hear it. We hear it on both sides, and we understand that we got to get it done, and we got to get it done in an efficient way and a, you know, fiscally conservative way as well. So, you know, we hear you. We definitely hear you, and, you know, we're working on our end too, and obviously we have a lot to re-debate and sort of reconfigure as a group.
I appreciate greatly the increase in transparency that the four of you are the newest member, but the four of you, our representatives in Masco, have brought over the last year or two. It's been fabulous. We used to have kind of an inside voice before that we kind of knew what was happening, but you guys have been really good on that.
And I know I've been sending, and I will continue to do that just because it's what I'm doing anyways. So I'll just, as much as we can update, you know, every meeting, you'll get it from me. So that's for sure.
Are you still of the mind that a committee should be formed, a building committee now, or?
The charter was already passed, so that will be formed in July. We've already received actually numerous applications, so if you know anyone that's interested, please encourage them.
I don't think creating a building committee is a bad thing. I think it's actually a really good thing. Then, if you stick to this schedule, it allows you, or a schedule very similar to that, you guys are going to be able to like move fast, rather than go to a spring town meeting with a whole process and then say, okay, let's create a building committee and so forth. Your building committee and your school committee are working in conjunction with the consultants that are actually coming up with feasibility costs, needs, and analysis. And the building committee can help make recommendations to your committee on what that scope looks like. I mean, that's ultimately what we did here. We just didn't have an actual building committee. We had a kind of a pre-building committee.
So, should be Middleton's turn for the vice chairmanship. I hope one of you is willing to make that time commitment.
Is it the vice chairman Middleton's turn or chairman? Oh, vice chairman. I thought it was chairman.
We'll see how tomorrow goes. And if any of you have thoughts on school choice, that hearing is also tomorrow. Get those to us before that. I know how Costa votes on that one.
Okay, thanks for coming in.
Thank
We
you,
appreciate
guys.
it.
Thank you very
Appreciate it a lot. Okay. Next, we have a public hearing for flammable and combustible license for Michael McGrath Incorporated, DBA Michael McGrath Heating, Oil and Diesel, 156 North Main Street, owner Michael McGrath. And I believe Jill Mann is here.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Moving away from there because that's where the breeze is.
Okay.
Freezing. Anyway, Jill Mann here on behalf of Michael McGrath, who is the applicant in connection with a project for redevelopment of that corner lot located on the corner of Lake Street in 114. Everybody know that particular lot. You know where Lake Street is?
Oh, it just recently sold.
Yeah, well, it's in the process,
Well,
right,
yeah.
subject to this. So we just recently got approved a really nice 5-unit building, and I want to show you the pictures. I'm going to ask you to pass them down for me, Justin, if you would. So what we did was we had just recently permitted it. It went through conservation. It's gone through the zoning board as well. It's a 5-unit contractor bay, really. I mean, it's an industrial building designed for individual contractors to have storage inside and to have an office space. I mean, it's a very unusual looking contractor bay. You could
It's not a
see
deep
it.
lot.
It is an awkward lot. So it's not a deep lot first, right? And it's on 114 North, which means you have a 100-foot setback, which you can't build in. And it is also a split lot, which means it's not only in the business district, but it's in the residential district. And it was split at a time when we did rezoning, and the lot was all residential, and then it became some business, some
So
residential.
the parking's proposed in the residential.
Only 30 feet of
Yeah,
it,
I see it,
yes, exactly. But the good news for this particular project is it's separated by a tremendously large wetland system to the rear, and then it's also separated by, I think everybody knows, the bus storage place right behind it. So just wanted to give you a preview of what this property is for. Oh, I apologize. This tells right, that's the notices. So Mr. McGrath got this project approved, and he owns a home heating oil business. And the whole point of this, and he lives in Middleton, he's a Middleton resident, is for him to be able to locate his business in this building. So that's why I also gave you that picture of the site plan, and you can see where he has 2 vehicles in 2 of the bays. He actually has 4 to 5 vehicles. I say that because he has really 4, but every once in a while he has a 5th unit that he uses to do his home deliveries. So initially in the application, we didn't know how much home heating oil was going to be stored in those trucks. The trucks usually have between 3,000 and 4,000 total, but this is exactly like petro oil. They don't fill up and come here. They come here, they come back to the site empty, and then they go out and get fueled, and then they do their deliveries. But what happens a lot of times is people overestimate how much they need, so there's always residuals. And anytime you have any type of a flammable product, you need, that's why I'm here, the chapter 148, section 13 license to store.
This is
flammable
just like what came through the other day. So even if the
Yes.
truck is empty, it still has to assume that it has a full amount.
We're required to assume. So the first step is always to go to, Chief LaCoste and say, listen, this is what we're going to do. And his response is, okay, I want a containment kit, I want a spill kit, and I want, certain protections. That was all put in the conditions for the zoning approval. And now what we require is the last piece, which is the license from this board to actually allow that. And this is a very similar license to those that we have granted previously.
So he'll own 2 of the bays,
He'll own the whole thing.
but he'll use it for the heating business.
Initially, he thinks only 2, but it's possible he'd use them all. But
Could
right
be
now,
all.
we're estimating, that's what, his fleet is only 5 vehicles. So he has the 2 located inside, and there's the tandem spaces, space 1 and 2, where possibly you could put the 5th truck, which he doesn't always.
So am I assuming that each truck holds 3,000 gallons?
Yes.
That's why it's 15,000 up to 5.
Exactly. Mhm.
And then
So if he added
diesel
trucks-
tank, which are 2 500-gallon tanks.
Yes, and with the diesel tanks, we're not permitted to locate them outside, so they have to be inside. So right now, he's toying with having the inside diesel tanks because that triggers a whole different set of requirements for building code compliance. So if he does store them inside, which a lot of
And that would
people
be
do.
diesel for the vehicles.
Diesel, not his vehicles, believe it or not, but for equipment. I guess you could top off
Oh,
a
so
truck.
this
but
would
there's
be,
not.
yeah, well, this is off-road diesel, so this would be, I assume
Excavators.
what he does is he not just provides home heating oil and commercial heating oil, he'd actually be fueling
Possibly.
excavators and so
Possibly.
forth. And so with these 2 self-contained double-walled tanks, are these mobile tanks that are on
Oh, no,
vehicles?
they're only for him, it's indoors. I mean, so he would have his equipment.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood.
So he will, nobody from the public will come there to fuel.
Got it, okay.
Any questions, Costa?
No, this is really no different than but a much smaller scale than the previous one that you, that you came in a couple of
Well,
months.
about 2 years ago.
No, wait, wasn't it?
Yeah, that Peter was a long time ago. Yep.
Wow. I thought that was like 6 months ago.
And time does fly. But I thought it'd be nice to show you the
When
buildings,
if,
they're impressive.
When's the potential timeline that ground could break?
So, once all the permits are issued, then we have to wait for the appeal period to expire, and then we'll do the closing, and then he'll hit the ground right.
How big is the building?
8,000. And the lot's about 1.6 acres.
So I appreciate, I know you already been before the ZBA, I assume. I do appreciate the aesthetics of the building, that it's not a square, flat roof, typical industrial building. I actually appreciate how this looks.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Fits better where that neighborhood is compared to other areas on North
I
Main.
agree. Honestly, the board has been really pushing lately to not have that standard, oh, here's a box, here's a flat roof. They've been
Garage
really
door.
pushing. Look, just, you can do this use, but can you make it a little bit more attractive so that
Yeah, this is a much better looking facility.
Okay, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, just so I have the name in front of me, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the public, the
You have to close
flammable.
the
And we have to close the public hearing?
Oh, I'm
first?
sorry. Mr. Chairman, I move that we close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Mr. Chairman, I also move that we approve the flammable and combustible license application that we have received for Michael McGrath Incorporated doing business as Michael McGrath Heating Oil and Diesel, which is located at 156 North Main Street. The owner, Michael McGrath, as described in the application that has been signed by the fire chief.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Take care.
Thanks, Joe.
Mr. Chair, can we take number 9?
Yeah, I
out
was
of
gonna
order?
do that, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna. Mr.
Scott
Cameron's been patiently waiting. So number 9, an engineering discussion with Scott Cameron, and the Moore and Cameron Group concerning the town-owned Locust Street property.
Sure, and while Scott gets settled, he's going to set up his laptop. I'll just provide a little update and some background on this. So for the folks watching at home, as you know, we've been taking a hard look at the Locust Street property and seeing if there's any effective way to dispose of it. So we initially had started through an appraisal process and then pivoted towards engineering first because that would better inform, once we better understood the use, what the potential value of that parcel would be. And so Mr. Cameron came and visited at a recent meeting and received direction from the board basically to bring forward 2 options. One would be conventional zoning, and one would be a slightly denser neighborhood, more in the Brigadoon style with more modest sized lots. And so running that scenario, Scott was able to come up with 12 lots under conventional zoning and 17 of the more modest sized lots that interestingly also allowed for a 50-foot buffer from existing lots as well as maintaining elements of an existing walking trail. And Scott will provide an overhead on that. He did take into account existing topographical and wetland challenges. Scott, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for sitting through some interesting conversations.
You can actually sit right there because that microphone
mic
in
will
front
get
of
you.
you will catch you. So you don't have to stand on ceremony. You can sit right at your laptop if you
I
want.
do pretty good on my feet, though.
Oh, there you go.
It's all right, I will sit. I'll kind of half, make sure this picks me up. Good to go?
Yep.
All right. Thanks for having me tonight. Again, for the record, my name is Scott Cameron with the Moore and Cameron Group. We're at 66 Elm Street, Danvers, Massachusetts. I'm also a 16-year resident here in Middleton. Thanks for having me tonight. What I hope to do this evening is walk you through kind of the process I undertook over the last month and a half since we last met, which includes a slideshow, just some photos of the site to give you and those watching a sense of the property and what I was seeing and observing. Walk you through some of a little bit of a historical data on the property, and then walk you through the 2 concept plans that I put together, and then we can talk about the conclusion of this or potential next steps. So to start, this is a picture from Locust Street looking at the frontage of the property. It continues to tail off to your left where it drops in, but you can see how the grade comes up. Moving forward, I got a lot of my data from MassGIS, Mass Mapper. It's a great resource. We use it every day in the industry. More recently, they've provided us with 1-foot contours, which are extremely helpful and relatively accurate. So we compiled a plan of the boundary of the property, which I highlighted in pink, as well as topography. What you look at, these lines here are your 1-foot contour elevations. So picture any like a trail map or anything you see, it's the same thing here. And I also compiled some soil data and wetland data on the property. And again, this is just for a general sense. This is not something you engineer to or permit to or certainly not build to, but it gives us a really good feel for what is on the property. And this would all have to eventually be verified through actual engineering and scientific studies. So the property itself, I kind of split it into two sides. So the northerly side, which is in the top of the plan, is the main piece that's accessible from Locust Street. That's the bulk of the property, the upland part of the property. There's a wetland system that flows from west to east across the property towards Locust Street. And then there's another upland piece on the south side of that wetland down in this area here. So I'll refer to it as the northerly and southerly sides of the property because we don't develop in wetlands. Soils on the site are mapped to be sands, fine sands, loams. These can be buildable. I was fortunate walking around here to see some older excavations on the property from work. We're talking, they look like they're at least 50, 60 years old. They've been there for a long time, but I can kind of go out with a shovel and poke into the sides of these and get a feel for the soil like I would go out in the field normally and do with an excavator. I found sands on the property on the northerly side, which are typically good for construction. You can see the middle of the property. I got some good photos for you to show you that. This is a wetland system that it's very extensive. Has a very happy and healthy beaver population that's doing quite a bit of work out there. And I'll show you some progressions on that. The upland side of the property is predominantly deciduous forest. The mature trees, larger 12-inch caliper, a lot of oaks. Some maples, there's some white pines and evergreens in there too, but it's predominantly deciduous. You can see this on the aerial photos, which I'll present to you. And it's a similar forest canopy on the south side. All the trees start to transition a little bit more to maples. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Trees that like a little bit more water. So just walking through some of the photos. This is the frontage of the site. There's a driveway actually cut in for parking to get access to a trail network on the property. The top photo left is your sight line. This is where you would take a photo if you're doing a traffic analysis. Looking to the left and looking to the right is the photo in the right. There's plenty of sight line to both the right and the left. So as far as a potential roadway intersection here, if you're looking to subdivide the land, I wouldn't expect any issues with sight distances. The property is quite extensively marked for Middleton conservation land. It's also there's a not subject to this one here, the 18.3 acres that I looked at here, but adjacent public-owned land is actually earmarked as Pike Messenger Park. Pike is a longtime resident and great resource of our town. And that's just a picture of the driveway. There's a commemorative granite bench for Pike on the property. And additional signage. You can see trail markers. And I just took a picture. There's stockpiles around the property. At some point in the past, somebody came through with a bulldozer and cleared a woods road through the property. This is the trail right through. And when they got far enough, they just pushed the soil on the side. And you can actually see these on the topography that you get from the state. They show up on that aerial topography. And just again, feel for the forest here. You can see all the deciduous trees. That's one of those test holes I was able to dig into, sands. The woodlands to the north, again, this is a picture of the trail. You can see it distinctly. You can see kind of the edge here where the bulldozer went through at one point in the past. These are some pictures down near the wetland area. So the top left is the older and highest of the beaver dams. The picture to the right is looking back towards East Street. This is as you're coming up East Street, heading to the north, LeBeau Drive intersection, and then you see that pond to the right. That's looking down at this property. That's clearing, and the view has gotten deeper into the property because of the beaver activity. And then you can see this is just another picture of the northerly wetland. This fieldstone wall's typical. The topography is rolling. There are a lot of lines shown on the topography map. But I would consider that developable. There would be some topographic challenges as far as your cuts and fills in the property. That would be a limitation to development to some extent. And this is just a progression. I want to show you kind of the last 8 years or so, the progression of what's happening on the property because of the beaver activity. It's notable. Top left is 2016. The upper stage dam is right here. There might be an older one here, but this whole area is kind of flooded out. 2018, they finished another dam. here. You can see the water, the black is the water that they're impounding. And what happens is they flood the areas, the mature trees die, it becomes an open pond. And over time, that revegetates and becomes a swamp. 2022, they've now finished another 2 dams down here. You can see they're continuing to back this up, so you can see the different stages that they're holding back. And then 2024, just this March, there's newer photos. So you can see now from East Street all the way down through almost the entire property because of this activity. The extent of the wetland that is on the fringe of this doesn't appear to be changing much. A lot of the wetland line is topographically dictated, so it comes down and then it flattens. So it could be broadening the wetland a little bit in some of the flatter areas down at the bottom of the hill, kind of a valley that runs through. So there is an impact there. These are just more pictures of the dams and kind of what's happening. This is looking from the south, looking north across the wetlands, so that would be the potentially developable land on the other side. These are pictures here on the bottom left and right of the southerly woodland. Notably, I'm trying to stand level, but the southerly side is very steep. You can see the green. This is early spring. This is April 24th when I took these, so the spring vegetation is just starting to come out. So you can see the green here. Because of the steepness of that side of the property, coupled with I have personal experience working in around the area, there's some challenging soils on that side. So when you have a steep hill and poorly draining soils, you get a wall of water that comes down the hill and it comes out the hill. That southerly side of the property it looks like there's a lot of wetlands kind of formed coming down the hill. I don't consider that developable land. That would be a good piece to remain as open space. Again, more pictures. You can see the green. These are wetland plants coming up on what is mapped as upland on the state website, but you can see standing there that these are clear wetland indicator plants. And these are just more pictures. On the right side, the top right is more the northerly piece with that woodland. There is a trail that cuts across the wetland. There's a culvert under that. I took a picture of that. It's a 12-inch metal culvert. It looks, it's kind of a homemade thing that's probably been there for a long time. And then typical to the whole perimeter, so there's a few existing subdivisions that border to the north and one house to the south on Locust Street. This is the one here. More or less all the properties have cleared right up to the lot line. I think I found one house that had a little bit of trees left in the back, but pretty much everybody's cleared right to the lot line, which is a fieldstone wall. It's pretty typical when you have single-family house lots. They expand, they put pools in over time, so it's normal and customary, but that's kind of your typical boundary between the forest and the house lots. And so what did I look at? So at our last meeting, you charged me with looking at what you can do by right. So with the current zoning and the current subdivision regulations in place in Middleton. This is in the R1B zoning district. So these are your 40,000 square foot lots, 125 feet of frontage, 165 foot lot width, which is always kind of weird in Middleton because you start narrow and then you can get wider to get the width where your house is, and then you can come back. It creates for some interesting shapes, but it's how it's always been. There's 18.3 acres on of land here, and there's 3 parcels. Here, there's a small piece that looks like somebody tried to subdivide a road in the past. It's got that, you can see the curvature on the very northern side of Locust Street, and it was never completed. And then the big piece, which is the remaining 17.4 acres. So what you're looking at here is it might look like a subdivision plan. I get in trouble sometimes because my massing diagrams are pretty detailed. What I'm trying to give you is a feel for what a subdivision could look like. I call it a massing exercise. And I'm taking a reasonable size house footprint. These will probably be in your 4,000 to 5,000 gross square foot home sizes, so they're pretty big, which you can fit on a 40,000 square foot lot. I tried to account for septic systems with a moderately well-drained soil, 4 or 5 bedrooms, driveways, a roadway, cul-de-sac at the end, and of course trying to lot for the frontages and the widths throughout. And what you come up with is the potential for 12 house lots. This would assume an 1,100-foot-long road, which would require a waiver under the subdivision regulations, not unprecedented in town. We have plenty of roads like that. Other than that, there wouldn't really be any other need for waivers under the subdivision regulations. Things that are common in Middleton is putting a sidewalk on only one side, waivers for things like that, but that would be developer specific to what their interests are. The topography coming from high here down low, you would see that in the build-out. The road would try to balance that in between. In the houses to the south, you'd have garages with walkout basements. And the houses to the north, be ideal if you had drive-under garages, but you often see homeowners try to get at-grade garages these days. So they'll put in retaining walls and they'll do the site work and invest in that to make the lot buildable. And the soil conditions over on that side seem conducive to doing that. As you get back towards the westerly side of the property, it starts to narrow down and you start to get wetland setbacks, and there's not a whole lot of land available for septic systems. I don't see the value of continuing to push that road out another 200 feet to try and squeeze in a couple lots. They're going to be really hard to do, and there's really not a lot of land. I felt like that was really going to be forcing it. Although the land area is there, the topography and the wetlands are going to drive this for potential development. Of course, so with that additional land over, you have 6 of the 12 potential lots here are over 80,000 square feet, which means they could put a 2-family home in those, which is a allowed use in town. So potentially, if you were to maximize the density, you could be looking at 18 units on the property on 12 lots, if all 6 of them put in 2-family homes. So it establishes kind of a baseline density. And I don't think there's anything to be developed on the south side. Even if you were to get approved to cut across that and fill in that wetland, you'd have to go through quite an extensive permitting process.
Busy beavers over there.
There's a lot of environmental limitations, and then even if you got over there, the land itself over there, I don't believe it's going to be developable. I think you're going to put a bucket in the ground to protect the soil, and you're not going to find any. If you do find soil, it's going to be very poorly drained, and you're looking at massive septic systems for maybe one lot. It's not going to be worth the effort to get over there. And it would also break up. There are trails walking on the other side. That's the rest of that land that is open space land. That's the Pike. It's on the state website. It's the Pike Messenger Park, Conservation Park. So this would be kind of the by right. I tried to accommodate some areas for stormwater management. That's always going to be a piece of it. You can get pretty creative with that these days. You can do a lot of stormwater management on the lots themselves too, for roof runoff, things like that. So, and what I did on this is I tried to say, if I was in a subdivision and I was a planning board, I'd probably try to negotiate some buffer at some places. So there could be some buffer or tree preservation here. It would be a generous, maybe that's in exchange for a waiver or something. But I don't really see, when you do these house lots, the only thing that's going to protect the land is the Wetlands Protection Act here. We don't have a wetlands bylaw. So anything that is upland, a homeowner could clear and use for their land, which you're seeing on all the abutting lots right now. Do you have any questions about the conventional?
Is any of that land mapped for the salamanders or any of that?
I didn't see any endangered species mapping on it. And I'll have, when we finish this process, I'll provide you with a report with all of that information. I didn't see any drinking water protection zones, surface water protection zones. So outside of the wetland, there wasn't a lot of limitations here. I can see why it was selected for a potential school when that was initially acquired by the town. Okay. So the next one's a little bit more creative because the zoning doesn't exist for this, but you asked me to look at a smaller lot concept. You had mentioned Brigadoon and how much we love that neighborhood. So I extracted some of that in putting this together. The topography is still going to be a challenge with either of these scenarios, so keep that in mind here. So what did I look at? Reducing roadway widths, the right-of-way itself at 50 feet wide. We don't need 50 feet of right-of-way. You can squeeze that down. You can put street trees in the front yards. You can do plowing easements I've seen. So you take 5 feet of the front yard and just a plowing easement so folks aren't concerned about snow being on their property. You'd have room for a full 24-foot road, curbing, a grass strip even, and a sidewalk, a 4-foot sidewalk. So you can squeeze all that right down. And I've done this in other communities through waivers, is doing a 2-rod road. A rod is 16.5 feet, so a 2-rod road is 33 feet. You see these on older plans dating back to the early 1900s. We started doing subdivisions mid-1900s. You could certainly do that today. It's a far more efficient way because that big right-of-way width, it's nice and comfy for public works to maintain and things like that, but it chews up a lot of space. The lots themselves, I tried to keep everything relatively consistent, so everything, what you see in the tan is all mapped out between 11,000 to about 16,000 square foot for your lot sizes, so around a quarter acre. So they're very efficient, 100 feet of frontage, but maybe getting a little bit more flexible, especially around the cul-de-sac where you don't need as much frontage. You can go down to 50 feet there and just flare it out on the cul-de-sac instead of trying to get 100 feet and force that in. So getting more creative with the frontages. The lot width, there's no need to flare out at the home. If you can make a square lot, it's much more efficient. You get uniformity. These footprints would be smaller in size, so these would probably be in your 2,500 to 2,800 square foot range, 2-level. We're talking raised ranches, split levels, things like that would fit here, capes, things like that. It would be a similar thing where you'd have at-grade garages to the south and drive-under garages on the north side, trying to work with the grade. You're going to get a little bit more flexibility with the road design too to shape it to the land, so you're not forcing in. See, the thing with the subject control law, while it creates uniformity and consistency in the community, you'll see a change from before they had that, where engineers and surveyors would design the road to fit the land, and then we get subject control law and we just start putting these linear things in because they're very geometric. So with flexibility on waivers and flexibility on your design standards, you can do a lot to shape the road better to the land. Meeting all your safety requirements, of course. We have to uphold best practice at the end of the day. So with this configuration, again, keeping room for stormwater management, we're looking at potentially 17 lots I think would fit comfortably here. The first lot, as you come in, that's right into the hill, could be a little challenging. So maybe 16 would be an end result here. The big thing here is, and just flipping back between the two, the lighter green color is potential open space that you can preserve. So keeping 50 feet off of the adjacent subdivisions. So there's a 50-foot tree belt in there. You're not going into the 100-foot buffer zone except for a little bit of a stormwater management basin, maybe something like that, so you're preserving all that. This is leaving room to keep a trail network on the property, so that the Pike Messenger trail network can be, Conservation Park trail network could be maintained. And I'll just flip back and forth between these. You can see the tan, pay attention to the tan, single-family home, conventional versus more flexible design.
Now, what's the roadway length on this one?
This one, it's about the same, came to about 1,100 feet. So I didn't vary that. Again, you could continue pushing that a little bit further back, but it starts to get really challenging, and I don't think the cost is going to make sense versus the value.
And you're confident you can handle the stormwater with that plan?
Yeah. This is all prefaced on, we haven't done any engineering studies this phase, so I'm making assumptions on what type of soil is out on the property. If it's a poorly drained soil, that can change the equation. Because,
I would assume the studies that were done there for a large elementary school and fields were determined to be able to handle the stormwater need there, which was probably rather significant.
Yeah.
I was involved with that.
I haven't
I'm
seen
just
saying that out loud, so.
One would hope, some studies were done.
So the question, I think, to us is, it's quite a process that the town would have to go through to do something like that. If we like that plan, is it worth that exercise?
I'll tell you what I like about that plan, is it provides, I like the buffer for the residents on the north, for the abutters on the north. I like that piece. I like what we talked about earlier about development that could be more affordable. Not an affordable housing development, but a development that could be more affordable. Now, on your earlier design that you had showed, several of those based on size and zoning could be multi-unit. So for the number of actual units, it's almost the same between the two of them. The difference is with the second is a much different feel and design to the development.
In the, so next steps, right? So town meeting, zoning change, things like that would be your belts and suspenders, the town's voting on that. It would be, you'd have to talk to council about the feasibility of that. And is it a spot zone? Is it something you put on the property itself through like a zoning change special permit? There are methods to go through that process. Is it available to the entire town? Are you creating
Yeah, I mean, I
overlay
think we'd have to be
districts?
careful zoning just that one parcel, because then
Correct.
it does become spot zoning.
Correct. I have done a similar type of development through subdivision waivers, which are granted by the planning board. And in this case, because the geometry of the lots, you would need variances as well for frontage, area, and width. Possibly lot coverage, more than likely not. So there could be a pathway as well through a public process with the zoning board and the planning board. So the boards that handle this stuff on a regular basis to look at it. I did this recently in Newbury, where we did just that. We got setback, so instead of instead of the large side and rear and front setbacks, you wouldn't need any issues with the front is fine, but the side and rear are constraining. You go down to 10 feet. So I think it was 30 feet down to 10 feet, or 25 feet down to 10 feet. You know, you're creating them for the development. Again, you'd have to talk to council and see what that looks like. I think there's certainly topographic and lot shape, and some of those hardship factors are here in what you're preserving. You know, you can see clearly this would fit with the land a lot better, and there could be some case to be made there. So there are a couple paths that you can possibly pursue.
So I guess what we'd have to figure out is, would going through the process of proposing a zoning change there have a significant impact on the value of the property if it was being sold? I mean, I understand the aesthetics and, again, affordability, not affordable, but affordability of that design. But I think we also have to look at what is, you know, where does the value come?
I don't think you can say anything about affordability, because it doesn't necessarily mean that this design, without other restrictions, that these homes would be selling for less than the others, because you could build
No,
them
but
up.
what I mean is, based on a smaller lot in a smaller sized building, we could make a determination as part of our sale property that X number of units have to be affordable.
Or just make a square foot limit on homes, and that in itself, that would probably.
No, but I mean, if you look at the 55 holders that have been done, I look at Peasley. Peasley, as part of that process, there are several units there,
Yeah,
5,
Yeah, something
that are
like that.
affordable.
Yeah.
Now, they're all the same square footage.
yeah, they have
And these would all be the same square footage, but you're not gonna make a development with 4,800 square foot buildings and say 3 of them have to be affordable, because a 4,800 square foot home is never under the affordability standard ever gonna reach affordability. A development like that, you're more likely to be able to have a developer that can actually make the process work with X number of units deemed affordable. Now, if we don't want big A affordable, and we're more interested in small A affordable, which is a development that is a little bit easier for first or maybe second-time home buyers to be able to come in, or folks to downsize into the community and stay in the community, that's a potential option. Other than every development that's been built in town, I think of the old JCC property and others where they're all 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square foot buildings that are surely not affordable.
Right.
So,
But I think that gives us the option, potential option of, if we RFP the sale of this property, saying that our intention is, you come back to us as a bidder
Are you willing to do a development? I mean, that is what, 16 units?
Seen 17, yeah.
You know, you know,
Another
15 market rate, 3 affordable.
Another tool that you can look into, and it's a newer tool that communities are using, is it's kind of a hybrid. So instead of doing a zoning change or an overlay district, you add another use to the zoning, and it could, it's a name it whatever. But that would also come with design guidelines, which gives the board to be zoning board or planning board or select board the ability to review the project, and it sets the parameters that you deem and the town deems desirable for the development. So you can specify affordability, you can specify house sizes, you can specify landscaping, you name it. You can put anything into these design guidelines. Similarly, we have for other things, but these are kind of next level design guidelines. And there's examples in a lot of communities around, and they can be simple or they can be extensive. Danvers adopted one a few years ago for their downtown, and the design manual's that thick, double-sided. It's a lot to go through, right? In other communities, it would be a 20-page section in the zoning bylaw. So there are tools at your disposal to get to something like this.
And how many lots was the conventional plan?
12.
12 with 4 of them that are sized.
6 of them.
6 of them that are sized as such could be 2-family.
So 18.
So 12 and the other one is 17. So if we put an affordable restriction on, so that the land would be more valuable with the larger lots, probably to a developer.
Not necessarily.
Well, if you had to do, I think 12 lots that you could put 5,000 square foot homes on is probably have a higher value rather than 16 before have to be affordable and the rest are smaller.
Well, I mean,
would
I'm
say.
saying just 16 and I'm not talking affordable. If they're just lowercase affordable, i.e. smaller size, smaller lots.
Right.
I think we'd have to have an appraiser give us a.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest, so I think there's a bigger picture here than the value of the land itself.
Right.
If your objective is to get the top dollar for this land, it's that.
Right.
I don't
That
have
would-
to get
And
appraisal
that
to
would
tell
be
you
the
that.
objective
Right.
for the top future property tax revenue.
Potentially, but with something like this, you're accommodating a need, right? So
Right.
the town's doing a part to provide a housing type that doesn't really exist for new construction anyways, because everything being built is your $1.5 million plus price point. So I think definitely you have an appraiser on board already, I believe.
Yep.
I certainly look at that. Okay. And I'm sure they can advise you on the value of a smaller lot versus a larger lot. From my experience, a developer is always going to go for that,
Right. I agree with you.
unless incentivized to do that.
Yes.
This was really helpful. Thank you.
So the first plan maximizes the sale price and maximizes the ongoing tax revenue. The second plan, if you have condition, the sale on certain restrictions, could, go toward you meeting a need. Right now, the average single-family home is $935,000. If you wanted to offer make some housing available in the community that's 85% of the average, you're talking about $750,000. Right, so
In the ballpark here, maybe 800, but you're in that range.
Because when you say the average, but the average new construction home in Middleton now is probably $1.6 million, $1.7 million.
or 8.
Right.
You're knocking on 2 million.
Right, I agree. So even if these were 900,000, they're half the price.
Yeah,
the-
but to get to achieve that objective, you have to have the right set of restrictions.
Right. And size, square footage of the house itself would probably be the most restrictive one to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, I would think.
design guidelines sound a lot more attractive than restrictions.
Right.
trying to
Restrictions
attract
sound like, what
developers.
color can you,
Right.
can I have my house and, you know, can I have a rocking chair in the front porch?
It could be whatever you want it to be.
Sounds like a homeowners
We-
association.
we-
You know, hey, that reduced costs for the town, so that can offset some of the tax if there's not a DPW, requirement to maintain the road. But it adds a cost burden to the homeowners.
We're probably, the time that we would be ready to sell this land between Plan A and Plan B is probably at least a year difference, if not longer, though.
Oh,
I would
I would
say.
say possibly longer.
Oh, wait, yeah, longer, at least, I said, right, maybe even longer.
I mean, the earliest that we would be going to town meeting to do anything if we wanted to zoning would be next May. And
Right, in a year.
And zoning at town meeting is such an easy process. So,
Plus, we'd probably have to do more of the permitting for this one, so the buyer would be assured of what he could do. The first one, we're pretty much ready to go now.
I think part of the conversation Scott and I had, and this is really up to the board and what your appetite is, but the second option there, in terms of addressing a need, that I think, at least based on conversations I've had with folks in this town, it seems that by and large, people agree there's a need, there's disagreement over how to address that need. And I think there's an opportunity here for the town to go in a direction that kind of sets the tone for what the expectation is for future development in town. And if it's, not going full bore into a density discussion, but finding a way to have more compact neighborhoods that preserve green space and still drive revenue, there's an opportunity here potentially for the board to set that tone for the next 50 years in terms of an upcoming chapter in Middleton.
And if I could add to that a little bit more as well, just from how we got here today with some of the issues we have in maintaining our infrastructure today is because for the last 70, 80 plus years, we've been building a lot of this massive infrastructure that is just expensive to maintain. That burden falls on all of us, and it results in the conversations about overrides on X, Y, and Z. This is a far more efficient way of construction. It's going back to our roots of when we did this 100 plus years ago, when we had no choice because we didn't have the technology to blast through a property and build whatever we wanted because we've got excavators and equipment to do it. This is far more efficient. The cost per square foot to develop land is the factor today. I went a good 15 years of my career where nobody cared what the cost of land was and the cost to develop it. Well, they did, but it wasn't the driving factor. It was the land value and it was the house construction value. That is flipped. It all matters today. It all matters.
well, I always question some of the new developments in town. I mean, people are having less children, families are getting smaller. What happens when those homes are sold? Like,
Multi-generational
are
living.
people clamoring to buy a $7,500 square foot home 15 years from now?
There's 25 houses in my neighborhood, and at least 20% of them have multi-generational occupants.
From a simple
Telling me my
investment,
in-laws have to move in with me?
from a simple just investment philosophy, I can almost assure that not any one of us in this room puts all of our funds into one bucket. We diversify, right? So if you have a diverse, housing stock is no different. A diverse housing stock is going to ensure the most sustainability long-term for our community, in my opinion.
Well, that's our problem today, and it's only getting worse, is the diversity of our housing stock.
Right, this is great, yeah, I mean,
So based on this, would you like me to get back in touch with the appraiser and see if maybe they'd like to float a price on both of the options? So you
Assuming that zone, just.
I don't know if that's the most important driver at this point. I think it's more the feasibility of being able to do it.
Well, I mean, we have to do an appraisal for the
Right,
purpose that we
right.
can't sell without doing an
Right,
appraisal.
right, right.
So I think it would be worthwhile to see value on both, because I think the argument is to what we've just talked about, not just the selling price, but the future value. And then we, as a board, need to put a value on what type of housing stock do we want to see. And because this is this isn't private land, this is our land, that if we're selling, we have the ability to put our fund
The
down.
appraiser can't appraise the 16 or 17 lot subdivision unless he knows what the restrictions are gonna be, because it's worth a lot more if you can put whatever size house you want on the 16 lots than if we're gonna say houses have to be 2,500 square feet or less. He can't, it's impossible for him to appraise Plan B without knowing
Well,
what
I
the
think you can
restrictions
appraise
are.
it based on the size of the lot. I mean, we're making assumptions that, I mean, you're not gonna have a 15,000 square foot lot with a 6,000 square foot home on it.
You could,
But it's-
multi-story.
So he would appraise it based on the assumption of what Mr. Cameron has laid out here.
So what would be the assumption?
Well, he would look for comparable sized structures on comparable sized lots and comparable communities.
And I think one of those comparables is the size lots and structures is Brigadoon. I mean, that's a concept that folks in town can wrap their head around.
Right.
So as far as next steps, we talked about the appraisal.
Look, Scott, if I could
Yeah.
just get back to this, so what do you think would be an appropriate square foot house on Plan B?
You know,
It would be a two-story, so
I
it'd be
think it
double the
would, I think it would be
footprint.
off place for me to tell you what that is because the market really drives what that is, right? I base this on Brigadoon. We know it's a very desirable neighborhood. And if you look at the size of those homes in that neighborhood, you're in your 22 to 2,800 square foot range. There are some that have expanded and built additions and
I
things,
think
right?
we're looking at 25 to 3,000.
So, you know, based on that comp, that's the size. And it's 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms in that vicinity. The other thing too, we talk about the larger homes, the lot size themselves are going to control how much you can do. You can only fit so much septic system in
Right.
that size lot.
Right.
That's gonna drive it. You're not gonna fit more than a 4-bedroom septic system on these. You kind of have some built-in
Yeah.
density
Yeah, for sure.
restrictions.
So I think we need to take a dual track, one with the appraiser, but one with the feasibility of being able to do it, and what that path would be.
Well, I mean, I don't know if the big decision is value price. I mean, I think that's part of it.
I agree.
I mean, I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to look at both, but this is different than any other development that's happening in town because this is our land. We have the ability, not just us, but
think
actually
filling the
ask.
need
Yeah.
is huge.
I mean, we keep talking about we have town employees that want to live in town,
Right.
but can't afford to.
Exactly.
I mean, and I don't know if this would be affordable or not,
But this might get somebody to move, maybe somebody that wants to move out of a $500,000 house to a new house for 900 would do it, but they can't move out of their $500,000 house and make it available to move into a $1.8 million house.
Yeah.
So it might spark that. It could be a lot of positive ramifications of this. We need to figure out what the path is to make it happen.
Exactly. Okay.
So I'll button this up. I'll publish a report for you, which will have all this information on some of the other data points I came upon when I was doing my research. Just other things that you should consider over, as this progresses along. And I advise, any landowner or client of mine the same things. You have septic system needs in this community. We don't have a sewer, potentially. There's one nearby. But soil testing would answer a lot of questions on feasibility. And that's something you get out in a day and figure out what you're working with out there. A wetland delineation, kind of know where it is, but that would be another data point to give you more definitive idea of what kind of upland you have in 100-foot setbacks will affect this. And then title examination, survey. And I bring those to your attention only because this is public land, and as you go through a process of selling it back into the private sector, there are going to be things that they're going to look for a very thorough title examination. You may want to know if there's anything on the property now, rather than spending all this time to find out there's something that's going to hold it up.
Yep.
And there's absolutely no opportunity to hook up to the sewer system from this piece of property, given its proximity to the sewer system?
It's my understanding that's something that the legislature has to approve. Is that something?
Well, not necessarily. So, South Essex Sewerage District has continued to say that there's not capacity, but the legislature has continued to approve connections into the South Essex Sewage District. So, I mean, I think we as an owner of this property should have a conversation with the South Essex Sewage District and then determine if there's a worthwhile reason to have a conversation with our delegation as well. Now, that could greatly affect the ability to do this. The smaller home footprint.
It would further that.
With, you what?
It would further that.
It would
and
make it
more
easier, yeah.
realistic.
Yeah, exactly. But we also have to figure out is how much work and expenditure can we do on this to the point where
Get a return
where's
for-
the return?
right.
Yeah.
Do you think there's?
I don't think there's gonna be a shortage of developers that are gonna wanna bid on this.
Right.
I don't think we're gonna put something out and then nobody's gonna respond.
agree.
I think there'll be a ton.
It might be different developers for Plan A or Plan B. There will be it'll be a different group for Plan A than Plan B. I'll tell you that.
And the cost of extending the sewer is something that.
That's what my question
depending
was,
Housing Works grants, if the MBTA thing breaks in
Yeah.
one direction or another.
is it a huge cost savings? But if that could hook up to the sewage district, you have all that infrastructure for that. Is at the end of the day, is it a much of a cost saving over the septics, or does it almost work out the same?
I don't know the extent of how much extension you're gonna need to do. So
I don't know how
that's
far
a
it
tough
is.
thing. I mean, if you factor 30,000 a septic system, you can do some math there. But there's the value of the land itself, so you can consolidate things a little bit. So
Right.
there's other,
Right.
you have the cost of the sewer to put in, but maybe you can shrink down the lots even a little bit more, another 1,000 square feet, just make everything a little bit more.
Is there public water over there?
Yes, I believe so. Right, there's public water. Right? Yeah,
It's public water,
Yeah,
there's hydrant right
yeah.
up front. Yep.
I mean, you would have to go up to the front croft.
Well, it goes to the edge of development on the golf course.
That has sewer.
Sewage. So what about the townhomes that were done in the cul-de-sac there?
Yeah,
Is that sewage?
Yes.
It's not that far. It's past Copper Mine. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, this was great.
My pleasure.
See, that land was owned by the Ferncroft, who was in the original agreement with us, so they had the right.
Yep.
Because that land was part of the Fern.
I'll reach out to you, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
And thanks for moving me up one.
Okay.
Staff reappointments.
Yep, so we have some reappointments. I think we have a list here. I have the list here. I can read it. I don't know if we want to do,
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the appointment for 2-year terms of the following individuals for the Affordable Housing Trust. Finance Committee Representative Richard Gregorio, Housing Authority Representative Maria Pecos Hansis. The Select Board's brilliant move in nominating me to the Affordable Housing Trust, and Jason Bernhard from the Planning Board. And this would be for a 2-year term through June 30th, 2026.
right, yep. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Anybody? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve for a 3-year appointment the following individuals. 2 individuals to the Conservation Commission, Peter Goodwin and Susan Piccoli. To the Industrial and Commercial Design Review Committee, Kendra Petroni. And the Patriotic Observances Committee, 2 individuals, Scott Solnier and Jillian Kemp. And this is for a 3-year term through June 30th, 2027.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
I would move to approve the following staff appointments. And again, these will be 3-year appointments, correct, Justin?
Yes.
The following individuals: the Assistant Town Administrator, HR Director Jackie Bresnahan, the Conservation Agent Kristen Kent, the Finance Director, Town Accountant Sarah Wood, and those dates will align to her contract because per statute, she's required to have a contract. Treasurer Collector Nick Federico, the Food Inspector and Health Department Frank Giacalone, plumbing and gas inspector Gary Paul, and the local building inspector Michael Mercurial, all of them for a period of 3 years through June 30th, 2027, except for Sarah Wood, Finance Director, Town Accountant, that'll align to her contract.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have on the agenda, proposal for a traffic count study for Memorial Hall bypass at the intersection of 114 and 62.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, one item that sprung forth from reviewing and receiving community input on the Memorial Hall parcel was the reanimation, I suppose, of the thought or question if Boston Street can be routed through the Memorial Hall parcel, through the conservation land, and cut through onto Maple Street. And so I did reach out to Pete Ellison at TEC. They're working as a peer review on the 40B project across the way, so they're intimately familiar with that intersection as it is. And I had asked them what it would take to kind of do a feasibility study to take a look at that, and his response was about $28,000 or so, 25, excuse me. And I had expressed him that was maybe a little bit of a big bite for a what-if type of conversation, if there was anything we could do on a lower level. And he came back with a origin destination study in the amount of $6,800. Mr. Chair, you and I had some conversation about whether or not we could do that in-house, and if they're just, putting spotters there with walkie-talkies, counting whether or not vehicles go that way. In actuality, they mount cameras on poles that can track the cars. They destroy the data afterwards, but they're able to read and interpret who's coming down Boston, then going towards Middleton Square, and whether or not they're turning onto Maple or continuing on up towards North Andover. And so the value in doing that is you could at least see that maybe only 5% of the traffic actually takes that path. Then maybe it's not worth realistically going through the step of spending that additional $20,000 or so to do the bigger, more full-blown study. Or they can come back and say 40% goes that way, and then maybe it increases the appetite among the board to kind of pursue that further.
Yep.
Hand in hand with our conversation earlier in the night, we just had some infrastructure dollars freed up through ARPA. And so if the board was interested in pursuing the origin destination study in the amount of $6,800, it would be my recommendation to use those newly freed up ARPA funds.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the origin destination study at the amount of $6,800 as proposed. I think that'll give us a good window into, if we explore the possibility of this as an option there, if it's actually going to have a meaningful effect. If the origin destination comes back and it's folks that are coming down Boston Street aren't headed towards Maple Street, and in fact are more headed either up South Main Street or over to North Andover, it's probably going to have a negligible effect.
And, is this study going to identify it by sort of time segments?
That's what right.
Yeah.
That's the most important
So
thing.
the high traffic morning and high traffic afternoon windows.
Yeah, because, overall, if you're just looking over a 24-hour period, it may not be, it may be different than those targeted areas.
I would
that
almost
cause
argue
backup.
only study maybe 7 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. and 2:30 to 5:30 or something. Just study
3:30 to 5:30 is when it's most horrific there.
Yeah, I would think it might be a better study omitting
Yeah.
the other to get it.
No, I can make a note
Yeah.
of that.
Okay.
All right, all in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right.
Thanks, Trustin.
Next is to authorize the Mass Works application for the same intersection, really, Boston Street and South Main Street.
So, I think we have to authorize. I think the work has been going forward. I think the MBTA vote, MBTA zoning vote is putting a kink in the works on this, but we're technically in compliance until we're deemed not in compliance. I think there's been a lot of work done, and there's some real opportunity for us to receive funding on the Mass Works, so.
You know, how much of the application work has already been done?
It is due mid-next week, so we're well along the way.
All right,
When
so-
does award happen?
September.
All right, so it's all the more reason to, most of the work is done, the decision will be made before we're technically not compliant, so.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize the town administrator to submit a Mass Works application for the intersection of 114 and 62 in Boston.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any word on when they're gonna do that adjustment to the light to make the left turn?
I knew you were going to ask. I don't have an update on it though.
I sat in it 4 times today, so.
Well, that's why you stay on the right.
Yeah.
You're going straight.
Rookie mistake.
Okay, any updates and announcements before you adjourn?
Do we need new people authorized to sign the warrant? Because we're in sort of starting a new year.
Yeah, was that dependent in the reorg in any way, or
Not really.
does not really matter? So
No,
yeah,
it
if
was-
you'd like to assign somebody, that'd be great.
Well, yeah, we could assign Rick.
The only,
Well,
I'd gladly do it, but I travel a lot for work, and I can't
Yeah,
guarantee I'll be the guy available.
Yeah, this year it's been Rick and I.
I would say,
Keep it going.
yeah, do we need, does that stay, if we do nothing, does that stay, or do we need to vote again?
If I had to guess, did you only appoint for 1 year?
Do you remember, Costa, if it was,
I don't think we specified
I
a
think
term.
we just appointed.
okay, so just let it run.
Okay, perfect.
Any updates and announcements?
Nothing from me.
Okay,
I move we adjourn.
okay, we're adjourned.